Yeah, we can hear you, Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Mount Vernon District SSPA Task Force meeting, Monday, July 11th, 2022. I'm Walter Clark, Planning Commissioner and Co-Chair, joined by Planning Commissioner Tim Sargent and Co-Chair of this SSPA Task Force. To conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA and emergency ordinance, the Mount Vernon District SSPA Task Force needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. It's a bit cumbersome, so I ask you in advance for your patience. First, because each member of the task force is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members are participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at appropriate volume for all of the other members. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask that each task force member participating in this meeting to state your name and your location from which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following the roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. Tim Sargent.
Present and participating from my home in the Mount Vernon district.
Catherine Ward.
I'm present at my home on Gladstone Place.
Lynn Pasco. Lyndon Jr. Gretchen Walt.
You can't get in.
Okay. Queenie Cox.
What, did we confirm Gretchen? Okay, no, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Queenie Cox.
Present, and I'm in Gum Springs.
Okay. Mary Payton.
Yes, I'm present at my home in Bucknell Manor, Mount Vernon District.
Holly Doherty. Hamid Munir. Hillary Clausen. David Levine. Evan Kaufman.
Present from Richmond.
Ellen Young.
Present and from Bellevue.
And Walter Clark participating from Vienna, Virginia. At this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to the co-chair so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion. I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard and each other member of the Mount Vernon District SST Task Force so move.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second. This is Ellen.
Seconded by Ellen. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing the motion, no opposition, the motion passes.
Second, having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels the emergency procedures and the fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for the public to access this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the task force to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. And that as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require physical assembly of the task force and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the task force may conduct this meeting electronically through dedicated video and audio conferencing line, and that the public may access this meeting by registering through the meeting link on the Track a Plan Amendment page of the SSPA website at www.fairfaxcounty.gov/planning-development/SSPA/south/plan-amendment or by calling 1-571-429-5982, ID number 449-674-674, hashtag pound TTY 711, and entering the access code. It is so moved.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? There is no opposition. The motion passes.
Thank you. Finally, it is next required that all other matters addressed on today's agenda must address the emergency itself as necessary for continuity in the Fairfax County government and/or are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and the discharge of the Mount Vernon District SSPA Task Force's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, say nay. Hearing no opposition, the motion passes.
Thank you. And so I would ask staff, do we have a quorum now? Do we have enough to join?
We do. One thing that we were informed of today is that Tracy Wood, who is a task force member, indicated that she was resigning from the task force today. So I think she just has other competing responsibilities. So she let us know that today. So I just want to let you know that that brings the total down from 8 to 7 that's required for a quorum. So we can proceed.
Okay. All right. And I guess before we get started with tonight's agenda, we will be going before the Planning Commission for public hearing. And we will need a volunteer from this task force to represent us at the public hearing. So we don't all have to raise a hand at once right now at the moment. If you want to think about it, and at the end of the meeting, you can email me or Tim if you would like to represent us at the public hearing.
I am not
think it will-
volunteering. I have a question. Are they gonna, whoever volunteers for this, are you gonna have to physically show up at the government center?
I am demanding it, yes.
Gee, thanks,
You
Walter.
got to come out and join us. You got to come out there. So, all right. So, with that, if we could, well, let me ask staff. Since our last meeting, were there any emails or communications that you need to address before we get into tonight's agenda?
There are no emails in particular, except those that have been incorporated into the content of what we're going to be discussing today. So we've received emails from Mary Payton, who emailed some comments on the draft text. We've had discussions with Mark Vianney and Lamada's team, but those edits and those comments we can talk about as a part of the task force business.
Right. Okay, great. And that, there are administrative to move which viewed as
Walter, I'm sorry. Walter, we're having some trouble hearing you. It's a little garbled.
you haven't heard me.
Try again.
And how's that? Is that better?
No.
No?
That's better, Walter. Can you say something again? I'm sure we hear you.
Yeah, is that better? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Yeah.
Walter, could I break in? This is Lynn. I just want to tell you I'm on the phone.
All right, Lynn, thank you. Can you all hear me okay now?
We can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, fantastic. So, we can move along into the agenda for the draft plan text review.
All right. Well, thank you all again. This is the 7-11 task force meeting, and what we have scheduled for this meeting is the final review and recommendation on a comprehensive plan amendment for the Huntington Metro Station plan amendment. So most of y'all that are on the call, I think right now have been a part of the discussion for a very long time. Those of you that are members of the public that are joining us, we will have an opportunity for you to comment as a part of this meeting. But this is the meeting where we've scheduled the task force to do the final review of the straw man plan text. Before we kind of get started on the review of the plan text, before we kind of dive into the details, I wanted to show you just one thing real quick in terms of kind of the workflow for the evening. So let me just pull up this presentation really quickly. This will be very brief before we kind of dive into things. But this meeting, unlike the past two meetings where we've gone over the straw man, we envision to kind of unfold slightly differently. So the straw man that you've seen that was sent out last week contains a draft of plan text for a potential comprehensive plan amendment on the Huntington Metro Station. Before we do that, though, I don't want to put the cart before the horse. For example, when we're doing these types of studies, one of the things that we kind of always try to come back to is this idea of should the plan be amended at all. And so what we envision happening is that we'd have a series of votes over the course of this meeting. The first one would be to see whether or not the task force generally supports amending the comprehensive plan, or as an alternative, if they would prefer to retain the current plan. We would ask that the task force first vote on this, generally supporting, meaning either yes, you support an amendment, or you support it with specific details included in the straw man. Whether they're there or not, we will get into at a later time. But we don't want to presume that the task force does support the straw man or supports the amendment first. So we would do that vote first. If that motion carries with an affirmative yes, that the task force does generally intend to support a comprehensive plan amendment, then we would proceed to the next vote, the next series of votes, which would entail a discussion of the straw man, the plan text, and look at a couple of elements where staff and the task force and the nominator in this case have been discussing some specific details and some potential alternatives for specific sections. If members of the task force want to propose other modifications to the plan text, this would be the time to do those, to propose those, and then we can either have through those six successive votes, either votes of kind of affirmation, just meaning folks can just generally tell us whether they support an addition or not. They don't have to bring everything specifically to a vote if it seems as though there's consensus on specific topics. But if there is a difference of opinion about the inclusion or exclusion of a particular text, we can bring it to a formal vote. That's not a problem. And then finally, once we conclude with the review of the edits, then we would bring it back for a final vote, which would be the task force's recommended plan text on the amendment. Does anybody, and that would be the concluding vote that would constitute the task force's recommendation on the plan. So with that, are there any questions about how the meeting would go and how the task force would proceed? Catherine.
Yeah, I've got some questions before we even jump onto that. Is that all right?
Sure.
I need clarification, and bear with me. Chart number 12 and chart number 13. Chart number 12 shows 55 feet right up against Biscayne for the height of the building. Chart number 13 shows that same area hash marked for a landscape buffer. And I'm sure it was like that before and I just missed it, but I don't know how you can say in the same document you're going to have a landscape buffer but then you're going to put in 55-foot high buildings. It's got to be one or the other. You can't have both because that strip of land is so narrow. You just simply can't do both. So I would like to have one of those disappear, preferably the one that says you can have a 55-foot building there.
Okay. I think we can, Catherine, we can absolutely get into that. I anticipated that would be a discussion point that we would want to talk about. So thank you for bringing that up. I can explain
Okay,
kind of
well,
our reasoning on it, and then we can have a discussion about if there's a
Okay,
need to
well,
modify the text.
there's a couple others. So should I wait on these until we get to changes for the document, or?
Ideally, yes. If there's specific
Okay.
things in the text that you would want to see changed, or specific issues that you'd want to see highlighted,
All right.
we have a time for that, and that's the point of this
Okay.
of the second vote if there's going
All
to be.
right.
So, but before we get into the details of that sort of thing, we wanted to make sure that the task force has a general consensus one way or the other, or not consensus, but a general support or not support of, or lack of support for an amendment, generally speaking, if that makes sense, before we get into any of the details.
Well, then I move that the task force supports changes to the comp plan. And those will be discussed.
Okay, I'll second.
Great.
Okay. It's all in favor of the motion as presented by Catherine, say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes.
All right. So that's one vote down. We got a couple more to go though. So Catherine, to your point, we can talk about that one particular issue regarding the 55 feet versus the landscape buffer. I think we will want to talk about that in depth and make sure there's clarity regarding the task force's preference for that specific area. In terms of additional items, there's a couple of ways that we could proceed at this point. One would be, I'd be happy to, if you think it's a good idea, to show the changes that have taken place since the last task force meeting. We could do that. Those are the areas that were outlined in orange, just to make sure everybody is aware of the changes, so we can highlight some specific things. We could do that, although I assume everybody has read the text and has followed along. The alternative is that we could just dive right into the specific things that you'd like to see changed. And I don't have a preference. It's really up to the task force in terms of how you'd like to proceed.
Let's dive in. We've all read it. Let's just
Queenie's
dive
got
in.
hand raised.
Queenie, go ahead. I couldn't hear you.
I guess my question is, as we go, if we're going to dive in, are we going to be diving in so that Mary's comments are incorporated at the same time?
We can do that. Yes, absolutely. I have a document pulled up right now that includes her comments in the sidebar, so they won't be missed.
Thank you.
Well, are you gonna go paragraph by paragraph? Because I've got multiple questions as we go through this thing.
Sure. So why don't I do this? Let me pull up, hold on one second. I'm gonna pull up a different version. I'm gonna pull up the version that shows the actual changes that were made between the last meeting and the current one. So give me 1 second. Too many documents open, so I have to bear with me for a second. Okay, are y'all able to see this?
I can see it.
Okay,
Can you make it larger, Graham, the font on it?
for sure.
Thank you.
How's that? Is that better?
Yes,
All right, can everybody see this? That's following along. Just want to make sure.
Yes.
All right. So if you want, Catherine, I can just go through, section by section. And if you have specific changes that you want to see, that anyone would like to see, that we can discuss those as we get to them. I think that works fine. So since the last meeting, one thing that we had heard, Catherine, I think you had brought up this comment, was that in our transit station area, we have this language regarding a 5 to 7 minute walk, and that the transit-oriented development should be concentrated within that specific number. I think perfectly valid comment that perhaps the more inclusive language would speak more to the radius. We have no issue with that. I think the TOD guidelines actually speak to both. And so I've made an amendment so that it no longer speaks to 5 to 7 minutes, but instead says quarter mile to half mile. So I've made that change. It still says a walking distance, since the TOD guidelines are based on walking distance and pedestrian movement, but it no longer has a specific number that's associated with it. So it kind of does both. So I've made that change in a couple of locations. There's one reference to the TDA here, another within the transit area development conditions, same edit. And then a last one right here, describing land units C, D, and G, that those are all within a quarter mile. Moving on, there have been no changes to the land use map. So as we discussed last time, land unit E, which is the subject of our study, would now be shown as mixed use as opposed to the public facilities base plan recommendation that had been shown here previously. So this is a mixed use type to reflect the TOD option.
Graham, what page is that? Which slide page is that?
This is on page 8.
8. All right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll zoom back in for a second. A couple of additional edits to make. This is a clarification edit. It's not substantive, but capitalize the terms development criteria. To make sure that people, when they're looking in the text and they're looking for the TDA's development criteria that are universally applicable across the whole of the transit development area, that it's a bit more easily understood that it's this list of 10 criteria that are used to describe those, but it's just capitalizing those terms.
Is that page 9?
That was on page 9, correct.
Okay, all right.
So now I'm on page 11. So this is figure number 11. And so edits that have taken place here with regards to the location of a walkway. So there's currently one walkway that's shown over to land unit I, generally speaking in the southern portion of the land unit and the area. There's an additional one that goes north-south down to the Huntington Avenue portion, the northern portion of the site. So that's an addition. One thing that's been taken off was a secondary walkway, generally speaking, in this location across what we refer to as the remnant parcel between Huntington Club and the LaMotta property. And then you'll also notice there had been previously 3 plazas or other public spaces. We've removed 2 of those from this map. So now what is shown is the central plaza area only. That doesn't negate the need for parks to be provided on the site. It just says that within the language that we've put into this particular plan amendment, that civic plaza is the one that is kind of the central organizing feature. So it doesn't mean that there wouldn't be more parks. It just says that this is the one that's kind of critical and core to the whole of the option, so to speak. Beyond that, I don't believe that there are other changes to this one.
Graham, this is Lynn. Is that just are those just illustrative paths? I can't imagine paths that really look like that. I can't quite figure out what they would do. That one would go right through the parking lot there, I guess.
Great question, Lynn. And that is absolutely what is intended, is that it would be a conceptual linkage. It's not meant to say that the link should absolutely go from this spot in space to this spot in space. It's meant to indicate that this would be, for example, a way in which you could get from north to south and south to north via another connection other than going immediately through the station. So it's not intended to be saying that it has to be a straight line, straight shot. It's meant to be a general location of a connection. So it's to your point, and I'll link it back to the text when we get to the multimodal section a bit more, so that's described a bit more further. Similarly, and I know we'll talk about the interparcel connection. Similar comment here, which is that this is shown very generally to straight line. So it's not intended to be one that's saying that a path, if there is to be one, or a walkway, would have to take a specific route through this area, since we know that there's a severe grade and routing would be very challenging. So both of these are intended to be linkages that are that are planned to bring the whole site together from a pedestrian standpoint. But no, they're not intended to be actual representations of where they would necessarily go. They're meant to be conceptual.
Okay, thank you.
Graham, you said there's one plaza in parcel E, but it looks like there's two. One along Huntington Avenue.
Sorry if I wasn't more clear, Mary. So yes, there are two. This one, nothing has changed here on this northern one. So that's when that was in the previous iteration of this map. We had shown three, generally speaking, on the North Kings Highway kind of southern portion previously. And so we've taken off two of those since they were kind of, there were parts that were a bit less important in terms of the total hierarchy of the site and the urban design. The location of those other maps is to be determined when a zoning case comes in. So we wanted to grant more flexibility in saying that subject to a plan that would come in, you would have to meet the urban parks framework, for example, and we'll get into that in a minute. But for the purposes of the language that we've put together, this plaza is the central organizing feature. And so we thought that that was uniquely important enough to put into this TDA wide map.
Okay.
Any other questions on this one? And some of this will be further explained in the text, so we can refer back to this one if we need to. Okay. All right, heights. So a couple of things that we have amended with this one. One of the things that we had discussed at the previous meeting was the strip of land on the eastern edge between the Biscayne homes and the rest of the site. And so this area in particular, which is generally speaking to the east of Metro Access Road, is we had two options. And option A was 85 feet, the other is 55 feet. So we heard the task force's preference for 55 feet or something even less. And so we've included that with this particular strip as 55 for the time being. Another change that we've made is with regards to this area in particular. This had previously not had a recommendation for height. It's just this area kind of wrapping around this particular area. And so this area we filled in with 85 feet, and that's just to reflect the fact that the Aventon is located in this location, and that 85 feet is slightly above what the Aventon is currently being built at. I think it's about 79 feet or so in terms of its total height. So that's just an administrative correction to reflect existing conditions. Another change.
Graham, just Lynn again. Thank you very much for doing that. It wiped into the courtyard, the court place there too. It was kind of a crazy mix up.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Lynn, this swoop right here, we'll clean up this last line. There's one last piece of line work right here that we'll need to clean up and eliminate. But we've also made that final change that you're describing, which is to take this area, which is the courts at Huntington, which previously had a section of 200-foot height limit, but the courts at Huntington is built, and it's not planned to be redeveloped with anything additional. So this area has been replanned to existing conditions, so 55 feet in terms of total height. Otherwise, this remains the same.
Thank you.
Sure. Ellen, go ahead.
So if this is going to be kept, if that strip of land is going to be a buffer, then why would we have 55 feet in there? It should be nothing.
So there's one kind of rationale, and I'll describe it, and I think that there may be a solution from our standpoint. The existing middle garage slightly protrudes into this 55-foot area, and so that garage, I think WMATA's architects were able to look at the total height of that middle garage, and I believe that the average height of it would be slightly under that 55-foot limit. And so one potential solution that the task force could consider is, in lieu of having a recommendation of 55 feet for this whole strip, is to have a specific carve out that indicates that that area where the existing middle garage protrudes could have a recommendation of 55 feet so that it's not immediately non-conforming, so to speak, but that the rest of it have a different recommendation if that's what the task force would choose.
But that's just a very tiny little portion on the southern end of that strip. And so if you want to put 55 feet on that very tiny portion, cool, but the rest should not have 55 feet on it. But we all know what's going to happen. Something's going to get built there. All those trees are going to get torn down. So, I mean, I would have to be voting a hard no if that doesn't change.
Catherine? Catherine, you're muted.
Mary's hand was up first, Graham.
Oh, my
Okay.
apologies. Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, that our understanding on the site visit was what Ellen just said, that it would be only about a quarter of that line of 55 there that would be townhouses, the one right off of Huntington, and that the rest of it would be left in trees, and that the townhouse area wouldn't actually go up to the tall trees. It would be more an area of trees that had been cut when the north garage or the middle garage was built. So if that's the way it's supposed to be, it should be that way on the map.
No, the townhouses should not be built. That was the whole purpose of that site visit. Those townhouses that border Huntington and Biscayne should not be built. There is not enough space there. That the trees need to stay.
Well, I'm open to the townhouses, but only on that upper northern part, not on the whole length of that property.
But Mary, that's where they ruin the townhouses on Biscayne. That's the very worst part, right there. All the trees that give any buffer to the townhouses are gone, and their townhouses are now just looking at taller townhouses or something else up to 55 feet. So, you know, if that's where we're going, I have to vote no.
So I have a question, Graham.
Mhm.
What is the length and the width of that strip as it exists today? What's the length and the width of it?
I have to measure it, but I could maybe ask if somebody else is on the call and could actually kind of rough it out.
I think
really
that's
quickly.
an important bit of information, because people keep saying it's too narrow for this and the buffer will be gone, and which I agree with. But when people don't understand how big or little that is, it makes it hard to have a really good in-depth conversation. But with that being said, A, I'd like to know what it is. B, I'd like to know exactly what is the proposal for this middle garage that sticks out down near Huntington. Is it going to go away? Is it planned to go away and something new put in, or what?
No. Mark, looks like you had your hand up. Feel free if you want to jump in.
We've had is Miguel Arreola on there online?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, Miguel, can you walk through? And unfortunately, the problem with the diagram here is the diagram doesn't really have kind of where the street, I guess you call Metro Access Drive is in context. But I guess
That's
we're
the
looking
point.
for, the area between Metro Access Drive and the rear of the townhouses. That's the depth you're looking for, I believe.
Correct. That's about 120 feet from the property line to the curb line of Metro Access Drive. It's about 120 feet, which is approximately the same width as the lots that are adjacent to it along Biscayne.
All right, what did you just?
Okay.
The hash mark that says 55 feet,
Correct.
that runs from Huntington Avenue up to where the Abington is, it appears, along what is the row houses at Biscayne.
Mhm.
You're saying that's 120 feet what?
No.
Right?
He's
What?
talking about kind of east-west. The depth of if you look where the area says 55 feet, the depth there is equivalent to the depth of the houses on Biscayne, and that depth is 120 feet.
Mark, those row houses and their land are not 120 feet deep. They're not. They're little crappy row houses. They're not big and their yards are tiny. So I just have I'm sorry I wasn't at this walkthrough, but I think that's information that this group ought to know.
Well, if it's greater than 120 feet, let's say, do we have a way to
So the width, what's
No.
the width and the length? So you're telling me it's 120 feet deep And what's the length? It's the whole length of Biscayne, right? Whatever that is, I don't know.
So are y'all able to see my screen
Yeah.
here? So this is the width of the duplexes that are fronting on Biscayne Drive. And so you've got I'm measuring about 114 feet in terms of the total depth.
Right.
From there to about approximately there. So Miguel's right. It's about 148 feet, at least when measured with Google. It's, kind of on the fly. On the fly.
Yeah,
So,
I just measured it. It is 120 feet off
Okay,
of a
so
scale map.
what you have here is 120 feet of trees right now that runs that whole length. Is that correct?
Can we go to the aerial?
Yeah.
Some of that's trees, some of it's grass, some of it's just trees. But,
Okay.
Yeah. But you
All right,
certainly
and then
you have a robust buffer of trees actually on the property line. Can we zoom that in a little bit further? I guess as you get further away from the property line there, the trees get smaller, but the bigger trees are on the property line as you go down the length of the.
Okay. All right, so the garage that I'm looking at now, is that what you say protrudes into, or what protrudes into this?
That garage right there, the
this
middle garage.
garage right about here, Catherine, which is
Okay.
this section of it protrudes into that kind of roughly speaking area that is.
Okay, and that's
Yeah,
going to remain, or is that going to be torn down at some point and either stay as a garage or become something else?
That's got to be remain for a long time. That's the newest of the three garages.
Okay, all right.
2008, 2008-ish.
Okay, then I will tell you that I agree with Ellen, if we ever bring some kind of language up to a vote, that 120-foot depth of trees remains, that you don't build anything at 55 feet in any of that, but where the garage currently exists can remain.
I'd like to see on that satellite map where 120 feet back would go. And it looks like there'd be around 28, 30 feet of trees left. Is that correct? It was 141, 48 feet. That was my understanding when we were on the roof looking down, was that there would still be mature trees left behind the townhouses, that they would not go back to the property lines of the Biscayne Bay houses.
That is correct.
So
There
where
would be a little bit of a buffer, a tree buffer, say about 25 to 30 feet from the property line to where the townhouses would be proposed.
Can you show that on the map? Go back 100. Does that have to be 120 feet for townhouses, or is that negotiable?
That's about 121 feet. And again, this is approximate. He's just kind of doing this on the fly.
So it's not much trees left.
Well, there's virtually going to be nothing green left, but there was suddenly we're just talking townhouses along there. At one point, we were talking about some other kind of facility, a community facility or something. Has that gone totally by the wayside?
What we can do, I think some of this may be resolved in terms of your questions in the language when we get to the landscape buffer section. So if you want, keep all this in mind, because it is important. But later on in the document, we have language about that landscape buffer area in particular. So I don't want to deflect. I just want to make sure that we know that we do have an answer in terms of how we put the language together for you to take a look at. But regarding the height, though, we could clean that up. I do want to kind of elevate one specific question, I guess, to the WMATA folks when we get to that section regarding metro operations. But I think that we kind of have a general sense of the comments that we're getting from the task force regarding that specific kind of carve out for the middle garage. But I do want to elevate one thing in particular to Mark and his team regarding the need of having some sort of flexibility for metro operations in that area, if it gets to remain for landscape open space. Are there any other, let's see here. Mary, it looks like you still have your hand up. Did you have another comment?
No, I made my comment already.
Okay, and Ellen?
Yeah, just one final comment on that. So, a 55 foot building of any kind down there would require removal of all of those old mature trees. So maybe they can plant some little sticks behind it, but all of those trees would go. So any buffer would have to be new little stick trees. So, you know, we all know that if, you know, you've got old trees with old roots, the roots get cut when you cut down other stuff and you want to build. So, you know, it's not a good thing at all. 55 feet is horrible, and it would tower over those poor houses on Biscayne who already have the Arden towering over them on the other side.
All right. I think next is Rosalind, excuse me.
This is Roz Doggett from Metro. I'm with the Office of Real Estate and Planning, and I'm a little perplexed about, here we have an area that's supposed to be for transit-oriented development. The county staff had really wanted to have multifamily. Metro had proposed townhouses, and now neither of those is going to happen. It's just going to be open space at a site that's really proximate to Metro. So I don't have anything else to add, but I just want to ask you, is that the result you want? That an area right next to Metro is now just trees? Thank you.
Well, let me add to that. Thank you, Rosin, for your comments. But you already, if you look at what's next to Metro, this entire site is next to Metro. You'll have 200-foot high rises. You'll have other 55 to 200-foot units. You'll have others that are 55. There's a lot there. We're only talking about a very small section here. And what everybody needs to think about is climate change, heat island effect, and everything else. The more concrete we pour, the less habitable an environment becomes. So we're not taking away from Metro at all.
Yeah, I wonder if I should make a comment. I'm well known for being from Missouri, right, which is where I'm from. But who the heck would want to buy a townhouse that looked on that garage? You can't turn it the other way because you're going to be looking in people's backyards. I mean, it's the most incredible sort of undesirable place to put housing, it seems to me. Now, maybe in 20, 30 years when you get rid of the garage there, maybe somebody will come up with some idea to combine the spaces and you chip a little off of it or something. But, I think we're arguing about something you couldn't sell even if you built it.
Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide a little context here. We got here, originally this was about, I think it was 200 feet. We'd argued to take it down to 85 feet. And now we're arguing to take it to 55 feet. I think Lynn's point is well taken. There's a very good chance that this may never get developed to begin with. But again, ultimately, all you're talking about right now is you got a recommendation to have the land area of the buffer and have a building height of 55 feet. If you don't do a building height, then I guess, what height do we want to put on there? Because, again, this is not a rezoning case. This is a comp planning case. And the 55 was in there to stop a taller building from going in. And, frankly, given how thin it is right now, it's likely you probably won't ever get developed. But, you also have the landscape buffer requirement. So, I think it's important not to conflate putting 55 feet there with meaning you're going to have a building there. It was meant to be a step down because for someone else mentioned the Arden site. You think about those folks that are sitting in this kind of canyon between the two. If we get further into the comp plan language, I think there's some more discussion about what may or may not come in the areas and stuff like that. But I don't know that, if you look at the entire length of that 55 feet thing, if you kind of think about that in terms of where you have, where the comp plant, where the aerial is too, you're already cutting it close when you get close to Huntington Avenue. It's darn near impossible, probably, as you get close to the stadium, but the parking garage. And I think right now, the question really is on the map is the question right now about whether the height is appropriate. And then I get the other question is just also when we get to the landscaping, with the landscaping buffer is appropriate. I don't hear anybody arguing that the landscaping buffer shouldn't be there. So I think it's really just a question of the height, and the height that was put in there to be a buffer, a step down from 85, which had previously been there before, which was previously going to be up at 200. So that's how we got to where we are. So I guess people that maybe want to keep that in context as we go through the rest of the evening to see, we come back and revisit this whether 55 feet is the appropriate thing. But I just understand that we got there because the goal was not to have big, tall structures looming over the folks in Huntington.
All right, Catherine, I think you're next. Catherine, can you hear us?
Sorry, you've got two charts. You've got 12 that shows this is 55 feet. And then you have 13, which shows the same area as green space, grass, trees. So you can't have it both ways in this document. So I think we need to figure that out.
So, Catherine, I think we have some language in the landscape section that we can talk about where we can either look at it, and I think we'll add clarity to it when we get there. But if there's a need to have different language in that section to make sure that it's abundantly clear in terms of the task force's intent, we could do that. And then we can update these maps if we need to. According.
But by contrast, Brian, can we go back to the landscaping, your height map again? You've got height recommendations in the conservation area. The trees are in that canyon too. So I think it should be important to understand, just because of the height recommendation doesn't mean that there's a proposed building there. It means that you got to have height in order to scale down in terms of kind of showing it in context with the surrounding thing. And this was merely meant to be kind of a shoulder step down limitation to the taller height there. When we get into the other parts of the comp plan, let's take a look at the actual site specific language is in terms of what should be developed there and what not should be. And recommend part of that site specific language will also include this landscape buffer too.
I would agree with Mark that I think some of this will be clarified when we get into the language. So I don't want to lose the comment because I think it is important, and we'll likely revisit this map if we need to. But in terms of clarifying what's in the text, I think we will get there when we see the actual text. Mary, did you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, well, we'll wait and see the text, but I would not support any 55-foot anything for the lower stage of that. I was led to believe the townhouses would all be in the upper quarter of that area.
Okay.
There's all kind of stuff sticking out of the ground there. It seemed like it could be developed at all. Plus, it's better buffer. The part near Huntington Avenue is kind of scraggy in the front, and maybe it could be a shorter lot. I don't know.
Mary, I don't know if the others could hear you very well, but I was having a little bit of difficulty cutting out here and there.
Oh, I was saying the top quarter of that 55-foot might be developable, but I would oppose developing the bottom 3/4 of it because it's big rocks, it's steep, it's not. It has bigger trees on it than the very front.
I see a couple of additional hands up. Just make sure that we get to everybody's questions and comments. Roz, did you have another question or a comment?
No. I said what I wanted to say.
Okay.
And I think if we're talking about the upper quarter, that's fine.
And then, Catherine, did you have another comment or question? We'll get to the language about landscape buffer, and I think that will be the place where if there's a discussion to be had more specifically about development in that quadrant or along that buffer edge, that would be the place to describe it. So just keep that in the back of your mind as we go through the rest of the text. So we've started to look at this one, but it does include a landscape buffer along the entirety of the edge of the Biscayne backing homes, or excuse me, the Biscayne fronting homes. So a landscape buffer would be recommended along this entire edge. Similar edit that we made compared to the pedestrian circulation diagram. So 3 parks or plazas and public open spaces in this section in the southern portion. Now just 1, to reflect that the text really just kind of speaks to the specific central civic plaza, but again doesn't relieve the developer of having to meet urban parks framework and provide parks on site. Any questions on this one? I'll zoom out a little bit so everybody can see the whole thing.
Graham, could I just raise one small point? Your top garden spot there is we've already talked long and hard about that being a building that's going up soon, so it's a little strange to show that as a park area.
Thank you, Lynn. You're talking about this one right here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. That's an editorial change. We can make that problem. It should be, for everyone's reference, this should shift over probably about 20 feet to the east to reflect where it's located relative to the new Parker building that's going to go in. Any other questions? Okay. All right. A couple of additional cleanup items. This is recommended by Mark. I think it's a good idea in terms of just cleanup language. This is related to the transit development areas, general development criteria. And so 100% editorial, everything in this sentence paragraph reads perfectly fine without this additional language. It just notes, the bottom line, it notes that within the transit development area, you have site-specific recommendations. And in addition to any site-specific conditions, all development should meet the 10 transit development area criteria that we looked at a little bit earlier before the match. So this is cleanup only.
Graham?
Yes, Tim, go ahead.
I'm sorry, which page is this, just to clarify for everybody?
We're on page 16, Tim.
16, okay, cool.
Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt, go ahead.
No worries. All right, I'm going to zoom back in so everybody can see. All right, these are cleanup items. So 34 acres, when you actually take out the Avonton, which we did by moving the Avonton to land unit F, the total acreage is 29.5 acres. This is a cleanup item for the tax map parcel, and this removes the Avonton from land unit E, puts it into land unit F now that the development option has been implemented on it. Similar edit here, which we had reviewed previously. So it's editorial. One thing that we've added here is that the transit-oriented mixed-use development option is recommended with consolidation of land unit E. So that's the inclusion of the 3 parcels, the 2 Amata parcels, as well as the residual parcel. And so we are recommending that this TOD option be recommended with the consolidation of those. We recognize that that may not be possible. And so if it's not possible, we do have additional language that says that if consolidation with that remnant parcel is not achieved, that any redevelopment should demonstrate how that remnant parcel could be integrated and developed in line with TOD principles. So that's an addition that we've included to say that the preference would be for this parcel to come in as a part of the TOD option. If it can't, we would just ask that there be a discussion about how it could be integrated in the future and develop in a similar. Couple of things. This is largely cleanup. I think we had previously said at least 20,000 square feet. And we've cleaned it up to say at a minimum approximately. So it's just a different word choice, but the intent remains that we would have ground floor uses approximately 20,000 square feet in the southern portion of the site and approximately 14,000 square feet in the northern portion. Additional language that we've included regarding community center spaces. So noting that if it's not, we are recommending that there would be a community or senior center use. And if it's not a standalone use, that would be a multiple use space capable of serving community or senior center senior programming. And then also that this would come out of the non-residential bucket of floor area, as opposed to just coming out of the office bucket. So that last part is largely editorial. This just allows for additional flexibility regarding the different uses. We did have a comment from Mary regarding this language in particular, which we can speak to. Catherine, go right ahead.
My question is, could you please identify what page you are on as you're scrolling through? Because if they're not recognizable, because I have comments based on pages.
No problem. We're on page 17 right now.
Okay, and then how many senior and community areas is just by the square footage? Is that, but that's for the whole of the site, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
well, I know that Huntington Club is kind of, we don't know what's going to happen there, but I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, that they had to sign in to putting in a recreational area down on Huntington Avenue in their units. Is that still going to happen? That the park authority would manage?
I couldn't speak to it. Maybe others on the call are better, a bit more familiar with it. Could I don't know how to answer your question, but I can check it.
Catherine, did you say Huntington Club?
Yeah,
Yes.
Didn't they negotiate at Huntington Club that they were going to have to put in some like pickleball courts and
a series of pickleball courts as a tournament style in the building, phase 2 building.
Right, down on Huntington.
It's a ground floor use. It's not on Huntington Avenue. It's within the development, but yeah.
Okay. Well, in any case, with that being said, if I'm reading this right, 10 to 15,000 square feet of community and senior center space, that's for the whole of the TSA area. And if that's the case, is that adequate? If Huntington is already, if they build, going to put something in, have you now just negated a senior center or a community center? Maybe that number should be bigger.
So Catherine, this 10 to 15,000 is for the TOD option area. So it's for the area, and it's one of those that could be explored. So this NCS had provided this comment relative to this plan amendment. So the study area that we're looking at, land unit E, noting that there isn't, land unit E is, the WMATA parcel plus the residual.
Within land A section.
Yeah. Does that answer your question? Queenie, go ahead.
Okay, I guess what's the difference between a community and a senior center? Because if NCS made that comment, then I believe that there are two different groups. And also, I thought that this area was going to accommodate the Huntington Community Center because it is extremely small. And it was going to provide an opportunity for a new facility.
That's correct. I think the differences between a community center and senior center, I mean, it largely comes down to programming. And like what's the intent of the facilities? There might be different facility needs, for different programs. But NCS was they had asked for this language that was flexible regarding either community and or senior center uses, knowing that this is a long-term plan, and that 10 to 15,000 square feet would provide sufficient flexibility to be able to provide either type of use. So they're right in line with you in terms of your thinking that the current facilities, are older, that they're largely undersized relative to the need. So that's the basis of their comment, was that this is something that is a need for this area. We have the language in here that it says that it should be considered in this location. It might not be the only place where it's appropriate. I think we had some language in the Parker, for example, when that plan amendment was being considered. that had a similar language about that site also being considered. So it's something to say that there may be a better spot, but this is one place where it could be.
Well, I guess my other comment is the fact that if it's, and as you stated, that whether or not it's a community or senior center would depend on the programming. But if you're going to have all of these family or multifamily type developments around in that area, then to have it dedicated as a senior center may not be the way to go, whereas just strictly saying that it's a community center, then you have a lot more flexibility about the programs, because the seniors and the youth, their requirements are totally different. And you can even take a look at what, the programs that are happening at the Hall and Hall Senior Center.
Yeah, I think we agree with you 100%. One of the reasons why they wanted to add both terms in there was because it's not clear exactly when the senior center and or a community center would be when it would be implemented. So there had been a discussion about the need for something that's kind of lower down, on the Huntington Avenue frontage, but we know that the northern portion of development isn't for another 15 years out, right? And it's dependent upon the north garage coming. So that given that uncertainty about the best spot for this type of use, it comes back to your question, which is maybe is community center the thing that's most in need and that NCS would want to work with the developer on, or is it a senior center? So the language allows for that conversation to happen kind of at the right time, which would be at the time of the zoning case. So I think we're right there with you in terms of wanting sufficient flexibility to be able to provide and have a partnership on that sort of facility.
I see the difference in between having a dedicated community senior center and having a kind of a rental space in some other multi-use facility, which means it wouldn't be there all the time. It might be there for certain programming, and then it might be used for something else, like a wedding at another time. And that the owner of the building might want to charge higher fee for senior activities than they can afford. So that was what my comment was based on. It seemed like two completely different things. Multiple use space capable of serving community or senior programming sounds like it would sometimes be used for other things.
And I think that was, go ahead, Mary, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I mean, is that the correct interpretation? That it's just
correct.
Room to rent for the community center whenever it was available?
Correct. So I think the idea was that it may be a standalone facility. That's what this language here kind of indicates, that it would be a community center or a senior center use, but that there may be spaces on the site that have kind of additional flexibility, that it might be something else in addition to those two uses. So this allows for that conversation to happen because we don't have a specific plan. We don't have, we haven't had that discussion between a developer and NCS yet regarding kind of actual needs relative to what's being offered and what additional land areas are available. So this would allow for that discussion to take place if there isn't sufficient area, for example, or funding, for example, for a standalone community center. So it's just additional language and additional flexibility regarding how that use and kind of that need could be filled. Does that make sense, Mary?
It is. That's what I thought it was, but it seems like it could disappear with that looser language. I don't know how you'd enforce that. And I don't know how much people would charge for it. I think it kind of leaves it open to being never happening.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's intended to be something that could be considered. I will say this kind of right off the bat from a cost standpoint, we typically in the plan, we don't typically get to kind of that level of detail regarding kind of the cost of specific improvements. That's the type of thing that happens in a proffer discussion. And we've reflected that kind of throughout the document where there's been prior discussions about kind of the financing of specific improvements. So from my standpoint, having language regarding kind of like the cost of something, we'd have to take a look at that, and, with NCS and with WMATA. But my general inkling is that that's probably a bit more more appropriate for a proper discussion. But absolutely, kind of understand the intent and kind of the idea that this, if it is an alternative, that it should be something that's that would make for a viable use. Queenie, I see your hand up.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to take it down.
Okay. And then Catherine.
Okay, back up one. Your note says that we need to continue to talk about the ground floor uses. I know we sort of ran through that pretty quickly, but I'm looking at 34,000 square feet of ground floor space, non-residential use, 20 in the southern and 14 in the northern. And then it goes on to say a market or urban style grocer is encouraged. Well, I think the grocer that went in at North Kings Highway, that's not it either. Wherever, the ones that's just being built.
South Alex.
Yeah, South Alex. They're about 20,000 square feet themselves. So you're talking maybe one grocer and nothing else. So shouldn't that space be a little bit more available?
I mean, one of the things that we've talked about with the task force in the past has been kind of what would be the type of square footage that would produce the type of TOD environment that we're kind of all going for, right? And so we had shown two iterations. One was 20,000. I think Joanne can correct me if I'm wrong. I think the other was 30,000 in the southern phase. 40,000. Okay. And so that was kind of one of these questions was what is, what's the appropriate amount for this? I can hop over to Mark real quick if you want, but one of the things that we've really kind of thought about from the staff standpoint was the key importance of having a minimum square footage for the ground floor to ensure that it is a mixed use project. So that's one of the things that we've really kind of leaned into as an issue to ensure that this is something in line with TOD principles. I had flagged it as something for for a discussion item, and we can have a discussion about it if you like, because I think that this is kind of a critical item. But Mark, if you want to jump in and kind of give
yeah, I mean, I think we had. I'm not muted, am I? Okay. No, all right. No, we'd looked at this, and I think we initially we had kind of thought we were a little concerned about it being, in like one big configuration or something like that. And, as we talked a little bit further about how it could be deployed, it may be very easy to get that on one floor. Our concern was basically how non-residential, really thinking retail might work. But I think we're comfortable with these numbers. These are minimums. It says at a minimum, approximately 20,000 square feet of ground floor non-residential uses. When we looked at the southern end, and you think about the southern end is basically the portions that are, we thought basically around the top of that elevated plaza on top of the bus depot or the where the bus station is. We were thinking that might be, you're not going to have any within the depot itself, but on that top there, you could probably have an aggregation of that there. They're also directly across the street from the shopping center there. So, the question is, how much could you support there? We're comfortable with going with 20,000 square foot as a minimum. For the northern portion, we're looking, basically the areas kind of right fronting on Huntington, and that was the area, on, kind of, I think it's called, I forgot the name of the development across the street, but, 14,000 street, pardon? Midtown. Yeah, I keep wanting to call it the Manhattan, but Midtown. But the Midtown area just in there, that 14,000 square feet is pretty sizable. that's, we felt that was adequate for what was going to be handled right there. You don't have a lot of retail there. Most people, in terms of what we're looking to do there, that's going to be more where the office is proposed and the like, and that would be kind of an adequate amount of retail to serve, what little residential that you'll have up there, but the office that you'd have up there and the commuters coming in and to and from, but you don't have as much opportunity there as you did the southern side. The southern side's got more of the opportunity with the bus depot and the like. So kind of hard to do this without the graphic in front of me. So,
Well, like I said, my only thing was it appeared to me to be a much smaller space. It can be bigger. You're using the word minimum, but when you throw the word grocery store in there, Aldi is the only one we found that was willing to do anything. And I think they were 20,000 square feet by themselves.
Yeah.
So you've shot everything else out. So that was my only comment.
And Catherine, one other grocery store that we were kind of looking at when we were trying to rough out kind of what's an appropriate size for ground floor use and ground floor retail use. Trader Joe's, for example, I think when we were looking at kind of what's a more urban style Trader Joe's in terms of square footage, there's about 13,000 square feet. I think there was one example in Arlington that was 13,000. So it's the Aldi example might be kind of roughly around this, but there seems to be other types of markets or kind of urban style groceries that are in line with TOD principles that could that could help to meet that, but not blow it out completely.
Yeah,
So
and part of it was a grocery store too. We've got the Lidl going on down the street, and you have the shopping center over there. So it was kind of looking around to see who would be really going in this area, and we want to present an opportunity for at least there to be something to possibly go in there, but also have enough flexibility to provide other uses as they might arise, because people might be able to satisfy themselves with a new Lidl or something like that.
That's fine. I mean, Wegmans just opened up on the second floor of the new condo buildings off over on the other side of the Beltway that you can walk to.
Mhm.
Okay. Whatever. Thank you.
Mary?
Yeah, I would hope we'd see more retail than that. And, if we want to make this a real kind of walkable, socializing kind of place, I could see a lot of, coffee shop, takeout places, eateries, in addition to just going in and buying something and leaving, but places where people could sit around and eat and drink and socialize. I think it'd be really, really a shame if that doesn't happen at these plazas.
And Mary, I agree. And I think that's why we're trying to get enough. The goal was kind of strike the balance here. So that's why you've got minimums in here. To get a minimum so you have some sort of critical mass, particularly right around these plazas, to kind of get that going there. But the problem is sometimes if you go in too much and retail change, you don't have a situation where you get dark windows and the like. And this just allows us to go in with provides that we have to hit these minimums. If we can get more and there's a viable use for it, I agree. Yeah, we'd love to see this become a really kind of active area.
Maybe we should have a comment like that in there as well, saying that the point is to have an active area here and that's a minimum, but we really hope it will be more.
Right, Mary, and I agree, and that actually is in there, and that was one of the, we've never proposed any changes. I think was Graham, was that the activation of the building form area?
Yep.
Which we thought, and we get further into that. We thought that was very well done, and when we get to there, maybe we can walk through that. I think that gives a very good vision of what we'd hopefully see here.
Well, the other point that I'd like to make is just dawned on me. We talked about the Vibrant Streets study that Street Sense did for the county. Well, they did it for DC, but I don't see any comments referencing Vibrant Streets, and Mary's comment really relates to that. So that's what makes a vibrant area. That's what brings people in. So that should be in your plan. Conversations about what that means and encouraging people to get to that point.
So Catherine, I think to both Mary and your point, Mark, I might be jumping into Mark's head here for a second.
Yeah.
One thing we could do is add a cross reference here to the active frontages section, because a lot of both of your comments are related to active streetscapes and kind of getting at that vitality question and vibrancy question.
Mm-hmm.
which we 100% agree with. And we have a section that's a couple of pages down that deals specifically with this. So one thing we could do, if you're interested, is include language in here in this bullet, for example, perhaps here, that notes, should be provided, and then say in line with the active frontages section.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Thank you.
Sure. All right, I'll add that here. Since we're talking about it, and I want to keep the train of thought going, I'll just jump ahead to that, and we can come back to it if we need to. But this is the section that's actually changed very little, with one addition that we can talk about. But this is the building forms and activating street frontages section that really kind of gets it to exactly what both you and Mary were describing, which is how do you turn this place into an urban place with an enlivened, pleasant pedestrian experience. So notes that it's the focal point of the TDA, so not just the site, but it's for the broader Huntington area. Really seeks to physically and thematically connect the site to its existing and planned redevelopment areas. Streetscapes along major pedestrian walkways should support active public realms with landscape panels, street trees, benches, wide sidewalks, areas for outdoor seating, browsing areas, pedestrian scale lighting, paving, other elements to really frame the building zone. So it's not just a throughput area, but a place where you'd actually want to, that you'd feel welcome to go to, and also feel as a destination. So it's not something where it's just for commuters. It's not just for the people that live there or will live there, won't work there, but it's a place that is inviting for everybody. We have additional language regarding architecture. So building articulation, avoiding monotonous building elevations, using design features to help activate that street frontage within the buildings proper, such as display windows, arcades, awnings, entrances, using ground floors, ensuring they have significant transparency. One thing that Catherine, I think you requested, was the addition of language regarding wall murals. So we've included language that when you have blank facades, that those should be avoided. But one of the ways that you could avoid mitigating them, one of the ways to mitigate them when they are present is by including wall murals.
Hey, Graham, this is Tim. Could I ask a question to just throw a lump in this whole process for a minute?
Sure.
These are great descriptions, what you have in terms of the building forms and active in the description you've got for this framework. And this is what do you think for anybody? Is it useful to have this sooner than you have it at this point, before you get into the visuals of what the layouts look like? This is setting your tone and tenor and vision for this area, and I'm wondering if that could, we're having a question and actually mimicking what you already have in the plan, but later on in the document. I'm wondering if it would be helpful to have that sooner rather than later. And I'm open, if it's not important, that's fine. But I was just thinking about that, just hit me as we were talking about it.
I like that idea for bringing it up.
I mean, you've really got a good vision going there, and I don't want to change anything. I'm just wondering if it's worth placing sooner, so it really sets the tone and the vision for where you're going.
So I like that idea too, Tim. Just to put a recommendation out there, we have the language regarding the totality of the development program. So it's talking about consolidation. It's talking about how generally speaking, how one coordinated plan should be developed for the whole of the program. And then we have urban design framework. And so this is the language about how the whole thing should kind of unveil, not just from a ground floor standpoint. Yeah, so I was thinking it might be best right about here. So before we start talking about parks and open space, it could just go up a section so that you have the program, the coordination of the development program across the northern and southern portion, consolidation, those kinds of things that are big picture important for the whole of the option, urban design framework, And then how does that urban design framework get implemented? It's through the building form, active street frontages, and then it starts to talk about parks and open space.
That looks good to me. I think, if you get it in before you get into the specifics of the whole design area, that might be, it might help people better understand what you're looking at too. And that's just my 2 cents. And if people disagree, that's fine too. It's not something I'm hanging my hat on, but
I think it's very sensible too. Makes sense.
okay.
Going once, going twice. Anybody have any thoughts on this?
No, it makes sense to paint the bigger picture first and then get into the specifics.
Okay.
Does that work with everybody?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. To wrap up this section, because there were some additional things, we have language in here about kind of the character of those ground floor uses, just noting that they should meet the needs of everyone that would be potentially using the site, not just residents or commuters. That you'd have clustering of specific uses, commercial and restaurant uses, for example, to provide that critical mass of activity that we intend for the TUD area. Flexibility regarding interim uses, so live work, pop-up uses, those sorts of things, that those could be provided within ground floor spaces, provided that the buildings themselves are planned and configured so that they could be implemented as their intended ground floor commercial uses in the long term. So giving some flexibility regarding use for those spaces, subject to market changes. Let's see here. So I'll scroll back up. I think we talked about consolidation. Did somebody have a question? Okay. All right. One thing on this section underneath the land use program bullets, Mary, you had a question about air rights.
Yeah.
And so I can. Yeah, so WMATA holds the air rights, and so this is language that's actually in the adopted comprehensive plan. It's probably been in there for, I guess it's about 30 years or so, but it notes that there are air rights that WMATA has over the station and their parking facilities. So their Metro Rail's operations, they have their facilities on the site, but in most of the program that we've discussed today has been looking at areas that are not over top of those specific facilities. But we do note and would carry forward text that says that in the long term, that those areas could be considered for other uses if they so choose. So it gives the flexibility that's been in the comp plan to allow for consideration of different
Maybe
things.
if it just said WMATA's there, right?
Yeah, it's WMATA's.
That would clear it up for me. I just didn't know who having that potential.
Yep. Yeah, it's WMATA. Okay. All right. Urban design framework. So this is, I know Mark wanted to discuss in particular. We do have language in the urban design framework regarding how the whole thing should be organized. The whole of the land use program should be organized. So the key, as we saw in the pedestrian circulation diagram, to the southern phase is that central civic plaza. We've included language here rather than saying that it should be privately owned. We recognize that WMATA would still likely own the facility, but we have noted that in staff's language that it should be provided and maintained by the developer, the central plaza area. And then with regards to the northern phase, we note that locating a plaza or other public gathering space along Huntington Avenue, that's kind of the core of the organization for the northern phase. In both the northern and southern portions, you'd have a grid of streets to establish a walkable block pattern. And then we recognize that the topography, the severe topography that we've all seen, does limit north-south connectivity, and we do have language later on that kind of speaks to some of the ways that could be mitigated. So we'll get to that in a second, but I want to make sure that we've had a chance to talk to this question in particular. Does anyone have any questions? I know Mark has a question or a comment on this section, but it's something that we'll want to talk through. But any task force members have any questions about this section? Okay, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, and this is really kind of not so much a substantive about the planning thing, just providing the necessary user flexibility. Where it says should be provided by and maintained by the developer, we propose the language. And or public-private partnership entity. Given the nature of the fact that WMATA is a public entity, and the developer may be operating in partnership with us, or there may be a specific site-specific entity that we have running this. That would be just adding that there. There's no change in terms of what we're proposing to be substantively. It's just recognizing that there may be a specialized user running this, and we have that comment not only for this, but also when we get to parks and open space, the exact same comment responded to the exact same language there in parks and open space, and that's it. Yeah.
So I've got those two. One thing that I would note, and I'll be brief on this. One thing that I would note is that from staff's perspective, both of these are dealing with parks. In this section, it's dealing with the central organizing feature for the southern phase, which is that civic plaza. And then further down, we're dealing with parks and open space, generally speaking. So not just that civic plaza, but also park spaces that would be provided with the development. So from staff standpoint, in both instances, private developers provide parks, and so that's the expectation that we would have for this site as well. So from staff standpoint, we support the language that's shown here. That it makes it clear that in both instances, park spaces, including the central plaza, should be provided and maintained by the developer. So that's just our perspective from the staff standpoint. We can come back to this. I think what we can do at this point, since we've had a good discussion on a couple of specific items, let's get through the rest of the document, and then for the inclusion of specific texts or changes to the text, we can have individual votes or votes of acclamation once we've gone through the whole thing. So we talked about building forms and activating street frontages, parks and open space. Again, this is the language that is regarding all of the park spaces. So we've made that edit that I discussed previously about the central plaza, but the same principle would apply to park spaces across the site. Additionally, we have in this section language regarding what we call the interparcel connection that we've taken out. One reason is just to make sure that if we have the language that it's included in one specific section, so it just reads a little bit easier, but it's not intended to remove that section at least from staff's recommendation. So pedestrian connections should be provided to nearby publicly accessible parks, including Mount Eagle and Huntington Park. And what this says is, and to land unit I, as described in the multimodal section below. So basically, for discussion on that interparcel connection, see below, which is this section that describes it in more detail and all in one place as opposed to two. The rest of it has not changed, so that's remains relatively the same compared to the last time that the task force saw it. Catherine, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and I'm sure it's in here, but I couldn't find it. Where are urban parks actually defined?
So we have the Urban Parks Framework. And so Urban Parks Framework is a section within the parks element of the policy plan, so the countywide policy plan. And so there's depending on the different types of parks that you're interested in, there's different definitions of urban parks depending on type. And so we don't include them specifically any definitions here in our plan text, but it is included in the countywide policy.
Oh, I just always go back to the fact that this document is supposed to be the people's document. So anytime you can put an asterisk someplace and say, go see X might be helpful. Okay.
So one edit that we can make. Oh, you know what? We actually do have it. I'll pull this up real quick.
Okay. Good.
We can make another cross-reference here. So as described in the urban parks framework
Okay, thank you.
in the Parks and Recreation section of the policy plan. And so that would link it back to what you're describing, which is the countywide policy. Queenie.
This is just a general question. Are urban parks required or strongly encouraged for development of parcels?
Yeah, so developers, so for what we're doing, it's recommended, but once a development goes in through the rezoning process, there's park impacts, they would need to be mitigated. There's a proffer discussion, so we would absolutely be asking developers to proffer to the urban parks framework and provide, sufficient park spaces to be able to mitigate the impacts of the development. So it's not a hard requirement in the sense of zoning, but it is something that we look at and ask for as a part of that proffer discussion. There are also, in addition to that, there are specific requirements for open space, for example, and other development standards that are kind of related that are zoning, but parks are the realm of policy that get implemented through the zoning process.
Okay.
Any questions on parks and open space? All right. Building heights. So I know we have that question, and we'll get to that in a minute when we talk about the landscape area, but relatively unchanged, except for that section where we had two options for that eastern edge of 85 or 55 feet. And so the edit would include 55, consistent with the map that we've described along that eastern boundary, and that's as described in the TDA height map. So I've done my best to try to verbally describe what you see here. Go ahead, Ellen.
Yes, so, and I have the same, comment that Catherine has. It's either or. So if it's meant to be a buffer and the trees remain, why do you need any kind of height? I mean, you're not going to have building heights in a treed buffer. So where the buffer is meant to stay should not have heights up to 55 feet. I mean, it should be nothing like open space, but buffer space. I hear what Mark has said, that, it's part of the, TDA, and you've got to have a height, but why do you have to have a height in some place where nothing should be built? My question, and it makes no sense to me. And I think it leaves it open for bad actors to do bad things.
Any others have any comments? I'm happy to respond, Ellen, in a second, but I just want to give others an opportunity to weigh in if they see fit.
Can you, at this juncture, take a comment from the community, because Jason Zaragoza is on the call, and maybe because he represents the community that will be impacted, perhaps you'd like to hear from him.
Sure, Jason, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you'd like to say something, feel free.
Yeah, well, hey, well, thanks for having me. Sorry, I missed that initial discussion because I'm not on the invite list. So I'm not sure exactly what was, discussed, but, I know when you were here, we talked about why there would be a 55-foot limit there when I think everyone was agreeing that those trees should stay there. And I mean, I know there was a discussion that nothing can get built there until the parking lot's torn down, but at the same time, I think that had we gone and looked from the Biscayne side, and I think maybe a handful of you did, you would have seen what little, or I guess what buffer those trees really do provide and what a 55-foot building would have looked like behind there. And so I guess I would say, obviously, the Huntington community would be in favor of just leaving that whole stretch there as trees and not a buffer with that 55-foot limit. I think you're going to get your height further in the site. There's plenty of space in there for all of that.
Graham, would you put figure 12 back up, please, with the height map? I'd just like to point out in Ella, on Ellen's behalf, that Mount Eagle Park there has no height limit on it.
Mhm.
I know it's a park, but we want the other to be a park too.
Thank you, Lynn. That is my point. If you're not gonna build on it and it's gonna be a park or buffer, it doesn't need a height.
Mark, go ahead.
I guess, that park, the Mount Eagle Park is owned by the Parks Authority, so there's going to be a public process involved in that. And again, this is not something dying on my sword over. I'm just saying, if you look, we looked about that 55-foot thing, and that was meant to be a step down or a shoulder, to provide a buffer. You go past that 55 feet, and you are right at 200. You've got a pretty steep. That is meant to be just to provide a buffer there. I think it's important to different. You're talking about a structure. You're not talking about like putting buildings there. You're putting a height limitation there. So you have something in there to protect in case something else changes down the road. It's a strategy meant to basically provide some kind of transition down to the Huntington folks. Again, it's what we've offered to, as a way to kind of provide a buffer, but
Okay, I agree with what you just said, Mark, your comment that this is a strategy to make sure that in the future you don't get a 200-foot property there. Well, if that's the case, then why don't we make this a 20-foot height, whatever the height of the current townhouses are, the row houses, then you've got a height in there, and nobody's going to go in and do that because they don't want to put the money into it. So then we'd end up with our trees being saved, as the community has just said they would like. So I vote for a heck of a lot lower, not 55. Let's go to whatever, 25.
And let's say right now we're worried about townhouses or something like that. What if you had to have a structure goes in there for metro operations?
It's not near the Met. Why would you need a structure for metro operations?
We don't know.
Well, the metro already
look at 20, 30 years down the road. I mean,
but you've already got the garage that's there. So if you want to have some sort of, we're stuck with that. I don't know what the height of it is, but you're stuck with that. So if metro needs some kind of operation, then let them put it on top of that. Because everybody's already used to having that garage sticking out in their backyard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
you've got the recommendation for the buffer there. I'm just saying, and again, this is a committee call. You guys make anything, and our comments are merely. I think we're all trying to do the same thing. We're just coming at it from different angles and probably different levels of different concerns. I think you want a height limitation there. I think you want a height limitation that provides enough of a buffer, enough of a scale down to. You could have a 55-foot building there, and if right next to it is a 200-foot building, you're not going to notice that 55-foot building. So it's ultimately what you got. It's a committee call.
Yeah, Mark, I think the point is, I understand, what Metro, might need to do in the future and all of that, but none of it should be done at the expense of residents who have been there long before Metro was there. Those townhouses on Biscayne were there long before. And I just think it's wrong to destroy the value of those houses by putting any building along there. It needs to be a buffer. So, put in, 20 feet. Fine. Nobody's going to build anything at 20 feet, 10 feet, if you want to put in a max height. But 55 feet leaves open a really big building that will dwarf the townhouses. And if that stays in, I have to vote no.
I understand. It's a committee call. I'm just saying, and recognize we were the ones pushing for 55 to take it down from 85 down to 55. So I think we all understand what we want to do. It's what the committee wants. Yeah, it's just.
But the truth of the matter is, 30 years from now, WMATA is, if they need extra space, they're going to be making exactly the same case with a different group, not us. that they're going to be arguing, and if they have a good case, they'll probably get whatever they need. But I mean, I just don't think we need to encourage it at this point. That's all.
Like I said, we've said what we need to say. It's a committee thing. I think we all are on the same. I think we all know what we want to do. It's just however you want to do it.
I mean, at some point in the future, Mark, if WMATA needs extra land and they want to do that, they are, welcome to make offers to all the homeowners on Biscayne and buy them all out and do whatever they want to do. So, I mean, I'm just saying, I just think that the 55 feet there leaves.
So since we're talking about this, let me skip ahead a little bit. We'll come back to multimodal circulation because that's more dealing with other portions of the site and less so on this section in particular. But I did want to talk about the language that we have regarding the landscape buffer. So this is, for those of you that are following along, we're on page 22. And so this is in the section dealing with green building, environment, and landscape buffers. So I'm just going to jump ahead to the last paragraph because this is supposed to work in tandem with the recommendations for height. So what we have here is the language regarding the conservation easement, which is not this area. So emphasize that this is on the western side. And so that's the language that says that that development within that area should offset tree canopy on site to the extent feasible with new plantings, with the goal of meeting tree preservation targets, and that's per the PFM. To this specific section regarding the landscape buffer adjacent to the Biscayne front-end neighborhoods, the vegetated landscape buffer on the eastern boundary, so this is the area we're talking about, as noted on figure 13, should be maintained and enhanced unless otherwise needed for Metro Rail operations. And so that's the language that we've put together. And so if the task force wishes to make edits to this section, this would be the place where we would most likely want to put them. We may, in addition, want to put them in a cross-reference up in the previous section regarding the land use program, just to make sure that it's not missed, so to speak.
Graham, could you explain a little bit about what is contemplated in the first part about construction in the zone over there, the conservation easement area? If that really hasn't come up in our earlier discussions that I know of, we've always considered it sort of off limits.
So don't mean to. We have talked about it a couple of times regarding the S3 block. So I'll just flag that in previous task force meetings we had that specific focused discussion about what we had called the S3 block, which is that block of development that's located directly adjacent to the Huntington Club. And so that's what's intended here is the development of that S3 block, a substantial portion of which is within that easement area. But it also applies to the area if there is an interparcel connection over to Huntington Club. So that whole area is within the conservation easement as it exists today. So I'm just flagging that. I've got this in the sidebar here just to make sure that it's clear that this applies to both. It applies to both the development of that S3 block as well as to the interparcel connection, which we've had more recent discussions about, but that's what's intended here. But it's not to the point to make sure it's all on the western side, the conservation easement. It's not in this area that we're talking about against Biscayne.
So Graham, if somebody wants to build a 50-foot townhouse and this land is labeled conservation easement, they can't do it?
So I think the easement, so again, I think maybe I should separate this sentence or separate this paragraph because we're actually dealing with two separate kind of areas. The conservation easement is really just that western portion that's against Huntington Club. And so it's not the landscape buffer area that we're talking about.
The one that should be maintained and enhanced.
Yeah. So
you can or you cannot build a 50-foot townhouse on that land.
So this language would say that you could not. So we have a landscape buffer area on the eastern edge. And as noted on figure 13, it should be maintained and enhanced. So that's the intent there, is to ensure that it is not developed.
Right, but see, Graham, that's our problem. You say that, and then you have chart 12 that shows 55 feet. You guys are just talking out of both sides of your mouth in here, and that's where it gets confusing, and that's where it benefits developers because they come in and they argue, but over here you say this and over here you say that. The other problem I have with this sentence where it says, and I've argued this for years, when you use the terms offset tree canopy on site to the extent feasible, every developer will come in and tell you it's not feasible. And the county staff rolls over, puts their feet in the air, and gives up. And that's what's been happening in all the communities where these developers are doing infill. Well, it's not feasible, so we're taking every tree down. So I object to that language.
Well, my original question was very definitely about the west side, not the east side, because the language applies to the west side. I always refer to this as twigs for trees, but I just was worried about what this does, and gets back to Mary's question again, is what does the special area mean, and what's the conservation easement mean?
So maybe we should separate these issues, since we're talking kind of about two different areas, kind of in parallel. And so if we don't, I want to make sure that we talk about both. But to wrap, or hopefully focus the discussion on kind of that eastern edge along Biscayne, let's take that first. So this vegetated landscape buffer area on the eastern boundary, the reason that we would continue to have the 55-foot limit, even though development, townhouses or otherwise, under the option is not included, is because of this last clause. So if it's otherwise needed for metro operations, so that includes the middle garage, that section of it that protrudes into it, and then if it's needed for metro operations in the future, then that would be the limit, even if it's not the development that's been shown on the concept plan. So if the task force would like to support stronger language, this is the place to put it in. So I just put it out there. That's the rationale. But if there's a different take, we can include different language in here.
Yeah, Graham.
I got Ellen and then Mark.
Yeah, and I understand that, but this is what I said. It leaves it open for bad things to happen unless otherwise needed. It's going to, the developer will come in and say, oh my God, we absolutely have to have this. And so all of our work trying to preserve these trees, not just for a buffer for the townhouses, but for our tree canopy in Fairfax County. We're trying to be green. We're trying to preserve trees. So this is ridiculous. So that's why if you've got to have that, I would like to take it out, but I understand it's their property. If you got to have that, then put in a 20-foot limit. Period, because with a 20-foot something or 15-foot something, all the trees would not have to come down. So, it's leaving it open. It's got too many qualifiers, and it's leaving it open that something is going to go there no matter what we say.
Okay. I have a suggestion, but before we do that, go ahead, Mark.
I was just, and I may get hit by saying this. Can we go to the aerial? Is that correct? Yeah.
One second. I've got 3 screens here, and
Yeah.
I'm really glad I do. Go ahead. All right. Can everybody
right.
see the area?
So yeah, looking at this, the concern is we want the buffer, and we want to prevent basically the opportunity for mischief in the future. All right, that seems to be the concern. So looking at that now, what the best way to prevent mischief in the future, or building something close in their future, even 10, 20, 15 years from now, is frankly, if you did have, hey, Miguel, if you're on, is it possible to build, you put townhouses somewhere on that portion of Metro Access Drive, that portion, but right along where the parking garage is, and maybe there, where you had that, and they had little backyards, and to have a 60-foot buffer, half that distance the buffer. So you had residentially owned properties right fronting up there, and that's the new buffer between there. Because those things, once they go in, That's not coming out. And those people are buying in knowing what they're going to have right across the street. And that would be a buffer to the people on Biscayne. But
Well, the idea behind
that's a crackpot idea that I take it back.
well, the idea behind N3 is that you would have the townhouses that would face onto Metro Access Drive and be alley fed. So in other words, they're rear loaded with the garage in the rear. The front loaded ones that I think you might be describing are hard to park under this condition. But I think the way these things are conceptually laid out is that they would have an alley there, and then between the alley and the property line would be a landscaped area. Call it a buffer if you will, but it would be of some dimension.
But I think the fear is if you go too far in there. I think I've heard a bunch of people. I think it's right. If you go too far in there, you're taking out all that. You want to preserve that big stand of trees. You know, how far can you, if you could design kind of ones that face each other or something like that, you know, with the side of the road. I don't know.
I mean, there is a possibility of doing so, what you're talking about too.
Think about particularly like right, you know, just kind of like on the periphery of here. Of course, you can't see my cursor.
Right.
But you know, preserving that tree line. But you know, if you want to make sure that nothing goes in that area in the future, the best way to do that is put houses in there. But to
That's
do
correct.
so, you need a buffer. But yeah, and again, I'm just.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what you're saying. However, listening to Miguel, if you're going to go in on an alley on the back end, what you've now done is, you all know, if you're not at least 20 or 30 feet away from those big tree roots, you're going to kill every one of those trees. It would take 5 years, but they will all die because you've now disturbed their root structure.
You're right.
So that ain't gonna happen.
Yep.
Well, in some cases you can. I mean, there are ways to preserve trees with time. You know, obviously, if you did some construction pruning early on in the construction phase, then the negative impacts of construction on that are taken up 18 months before you're even building. So there's ways of doing that. I should also mention that the orientation of the, well, yeah, we do actually, but the orientation of the townhomes would be a rear orientation to a rear orientation too, from a compatibility standpoint, because I think that the homes that you're talking about on Biscayne Drive, which are about 10 of them, 5 pairs of duplexes essentially, have that same orientation. And certainly the setback from the back of the building, we could try to hopefully maintain. So that relationship is from a compatibility standpoint, is preserved.
Graham, why can't we just say we wanted to stay a green area without any with nothing else there, and just leave a flat statement? Can't we just do that as a thing? I mean, if in the end that's not what happens, then there's also the future and something might be out there. But we just can't. We just proclaim it. The whole thing should be a buffer.
Agree.
So I think that's the decision for the task force among a couple of others. You know, is that what you want to do? So a couple of things that we could do, because I've heard kind of two suggestions. One is to indicate that area is to remain undeveloped. The other was the other idea that Ellen suggested, I think, which is to retain the current language that we have here that says unless otherwise needed for metro operations, and then lower the height limit to, I think you said 20 feet. So in either instance, the intent is clear that it would be land that is with relatively low impact to the impact, to the duplexes behind. But I don't want to, I can suggest language if you'd like, but if others have specific language that they'd like to include, I can note it here in the comments.
I agree with Lynn. I think it needs to say that it just remains undeveloped, just end of story. So, and Miguel, I understand that, sometimes, builders can go in and maintain trees, but this is such a tight little spot, and any builder is going to come in and say, I'm not interested unless I can take down the trees because it's too expensive for me to, come in and go out and blah, blah, blah. So it just needs to remain undeveloped.
Well, I would go for some townhouses if they could be developed on a very narrow strip, but it sounds like they cannot. So I would go for leaving it undeveloped in that case.
If you had townhouses, you know, like right next to the hospital, Inova Hospital. You know, those ones that are kind of facing each other on like across a little cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
Something like
Atomic
that.
Trace.
Yeah, I'm trying to. We could.
Atomic Trace.
Yeah, Graham, can we pull into the pull the aerial again? We go to the hospital.
Yeah, I don't think there's space for that there, Mark.
There might not be. I'm just trying to think of ways to kind of prevent it.
That area, Mark, was 7 acres of ground that they put those townhouses on.
Right.
So you can't do that.
Yeah, I'm thinking. What I'm saying is, you have not the James David Way thing, but the way the ones are oriented. You had like 2 or 3, and I don't even know if it's even buildable. That's even like that.
It's hideous.
Yeah, it is, and there isn't. You don't have that kind of space at the Metro site. It just isn't there. Period.
Very good.
And don't forget, they're going to be looking at a concrete wall.
I know, but they're buying into that. You know, that's they're buying into that, and they can't be moved, and that prevents something else from coming in there 20 years later that looms over the folks at Huntington. But
yeah, but it have murals on it, so that'll be okay.
It will have murals.
Okay, so in the interest of, I know it's 8:30 right now, and so we're at the towards the end of when we were thinking we were going to end, but I want to see if folks can stay on and to ensure that we have a quorum that could potentially stay on, because this has been a very significant and robust discussion. If we can continue it, and our chairs are interested in continuing the meeting, I'd like to do so, because I think we're nearing a point where we're going to actually start voting. And I hate to lose the train of thought if we don't have to. So, Commissioner Clark, Commissioner Sargent, if that, I just really
I'm here. I've got coffee.
I can stay.
Commissioner Clark, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm muted there. I was saying we all need to toughen up and let's see it through. Let's get it done.
That's good. All right. Okay, so I'll note this one as an area specific for vote. And we'll come back to that when we're actually going through the list. Okay. Okay, the other section, so where we were previously was under multimodal circulation.
Oh, Graham, I'm sorry, but you've skipped the question of the western side.
You are correct.
Still, that language leaves me very twitching. That's what I was wondering.
So regarding the trees in the conservation easement, or regarding the offset, which
I know we've always talked about an access to the Huntington Club, that I understand.
Mm-hmm.
But does the wording that you have there, does that say, I go back to Mary's question, can you build townhouses there or not?
No.
Okay,
no,
thanks.
So the answer is that under the recommendation, what's recommended in that location, I mean, we don't have any specific text that says what would happen in that conservation easement area, other than to say that development in that easement area should offset tree canopies. Multifamily units are the recommended residential type for the option, and so townhouses, no. What our recommendation would be is for multifamily. It doesn't necessarily say exactly the orientation. I know we have had discussions about concept plans that show park space, for example, on North Kings Highway, kind of in that area, in that zone, and then in some instances we've had kind of a more forward-facing building, so that the building is fronting on North Kings Highway, and you have additional area in the back, for example, for a trail to Huntington Club. So we looked at a couple of different orientations over the course of the task force process, and what we have here is language regarding development in that area. No matter how it takes place, is that if there is development within that conservation easement area, that the tree canopy would need to be assessed, and that you would have as a goal looking to offset the tree canopy to the extent feasible with new plantings on the site. So I know that I know VICA, for example, has been able to look at some of the tree canopy in that area and to see, could that potentially take place in terms of offsetting tree canopy on site, either through preservation of other areas, such as the landscape buffer along the Biscayne frontage, for example. That was an idea that was thrown out there. It looked at kind of a limited area. It didn't look at the area, for example, where townhouses were shown on the concept plan. So I think the language that we have provides the intent, which is to offset tree canopy, preserved area, if it is developed in that if development occurs in a conservation easement by offsetting tree canopy, either through preservation of other areas that are currently unpreserved, or through new plantings through the development. So
Okay.
that's the intent then.
Graham, just so I could go back, I remember the discussion up by North Kings Highway, and frankly, I don't have any problem with a high rise up there if it gets into the easement. That's not. But I was thinking more in terms of on the west side of Metro itself. There's that other strip, if you want to call it a buffer strip of green, that's down through there that butts right up against the Huntington Club area. Are you thinking about development there? I haven't heard any discussion of that. Maybe I just missed it.
Let me pull up the concept plan, because I think that will help illustrate what we're talking about here. Hold on one second. Okay, so again, this is not being included in the plan, but this is an illustrative that HCM and the WMATA team had put together that showed where development, and this by the way was also modified when Dover Cole made recommendations on the plan amendment as well. And so this area, generally speaking, in this neck of the woods, is the existing conservation easement area. And so we'd shown some exhibits that showed the exact overlay, and if I can get them, I'll try to find them. But part of this S3 block, as it's referred to, is what's been shown and has been described as a potential spot for a high rise. And so a portion of it, most of it, is located within the existing conservation easement area. So that's
all on top of the hill, right? You're talking about that's up where the fort itself was essentially there.
Much of it is, although it does start to really kind of slope down in this general area. So this is kind of the top of the hill, so to speak, and then it does start to drop off right about here. So, and so you have the cross easement interparcel connection that's been shown, which we have language in here about, and kind of that severe grade change and how that would need to be mitigated and studied. We'd need to have a feasibility study that would occur at the time of rezoning to ensure that it's a viable improvement.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to run you off in another direction. I was mostly worried about the green area just north of the metro station itself, but you're not contemplating a high rise there, I see now.
No, this is kind of due west. So the north is this direction on Huntington Avenue.
Yeah, I mean west. I said north. It's just your orientation there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the answer is to west, yes. This is an area that's within the conservation easement today, or the area of the existing conservation easement. So this is an area that we have talked about and discussed the need to kind of have this discussion about priorities for this area regarding TOD. This is kind of an area that was shown as a high rise. Also a site that where you'd have a significant there's significant potential for affordable housing, given that it is a high rise. And how do you weigh that in a TOD context against the need to preserve areas for trees? And so
yeah, I'm sorry. I was just thinking about keeping green on both sides of the metro station, and I'm fine. I don't need any more explanation. I understand what you're doing now.
Gotcha. Any other questions about that language? And I'll pull it up just in 1 second. Boy, I'm really glad that I came into the office today and have my 3 screens here so that I can actually have all these documents open at the same time. Okay. All right. And so,
believe me, we're all impressed with your mixing them up. It's really good.
I appreciate it. So this language is related to that area generally, not just the interparcel connection, but to that whole of the estuary block. That if development occurs in that area, given that there is significant tree canopy in that area, that there would be a need to either through new plantings, or through preservation, or through the restoration of other areas on the site, ensure that there is an offset of the tree canopy, so that you're not just cutting down the trees and removing areas from easement, but that there would be a good amount of canopy that could be preserved elsewhere on the site. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, Graham, can we see figure 13, please? Because I noticed this a while ago, and I just said this is a minor quibble, but just speaking of this being, the people's document, as a layperson, I'm looking at this, and so on the top, further up, that buffer up there on the, I guess that would be the east side over there, but closer to Cameron Run. I don't really understand what the purpose of this buffer or what that's supposed to mean, because you have it going literally over where there's townhouses, and I know that stretch there, and there's really nothing there that would be considered a buffer. And same with the bottom, as you go lower south, there's the buffer's going right over where their houses. So what is the purpose of that supposed to be?
Yeah, it's intended to do a couple of things. One is if there is development of a certain intensity against another, if there's a need to have a kind of a transition of screen, a natural transition and screen, that the landscape buffer is intended to kind of show you the general location of it. On our site, with the language that's being contemplated and that's included in the text, it means something more than just that, though. So the language that we've been discussing that's included here relates to the existing landscape buffer. So if that needs further clarification, then we can make that. But the buffer that's shown here is the same width and kind of it's the same width as this to represent that there is landscape buffer there today. But we do have language that says that area, not just the buffer and for the purpose of providing a screen, but that area of existing landscape strip would need to remain. And so that's it's an important distinction, because in some cases, like you mentioned, there isn't much. It's certainly not the same type of landscape screening that you would that you have, for example, between the Biscayne fronting homes and metro operations.
Well, Graham, if that's the case, and I appreciate your explanation of that, and Jason, thanks for bringing that up, then you ought to change your whatever you call that thing, shows you what those are. What do you call that? The figure.
The legend element?
Yeah, key, excuse me. Change the key, because it indicates they're the same, and they're not the same. One has a lot of trees on it. The other one doesn't have anything on it. Thank you.
That's correct. Catherine, am I capturing this correct? And I'll make this more clear.
I'll defer to Jason, but there is actually a creek that goes down there, a creek bed that goes through there. I think we're more or less where you have that.
Yeah, maybe that's what that's referring to. I was just figuring the portion that goes over the house.
Right now the key says they're both landscape buffers, but they're not. They're different. So you ought to just show whatever.
There is a real buffer there, Catherine. I mean, you can't cross it, for example, walking there.
It's not a ton of trees, and somebody could build across it and cover that area up. But they're different, as Graham indicated, so they ought to be shown in their existing conditions, so people understand it.
Yeah, that's not a problem. I think what we could do is take that landscape buffer symbology. I was looking for the word. Legend element is a terrible word. Symbol. And modify it to show the existing conditions. So it would buffer out a little bit further in this area to be up against the eastern edge of Metro Garage Access Drive, for example. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Multimodal circulate. Oh, so were there any other questions about the green building and landscape buffer and conservation easement area language? Okay. All right, and then let's go back to multimodal circulation and parking. So we've talked about building heights, multimodal circulation. So a couple of edits that we've made here relate.
Could you make it a little bit bigger again for us, Graham? Thanks.
Is that better?
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
Okay. So a couple of edits that we've made here relate to how we view the multimodal circulation network and specifically the pedestrian circulation network. So kind of right off the bat, one of the things that we've really tried to emphasize as a part of the task force process is, given the constrained nature of the site from a slope standpoint, what is a priority in terms of being able to connect the site across itself from north to south as well as to its surroundings. And so we have language in here that tries to speak to specifically that, noting that the network should connect the northern and southern portions of the site to the broader TDA. So that's the area north of Huntington Avenue and to the west of North Kings Highway and to the south of the site. And so land unit F, for example, that's the course at Huntington, and land unit I is Huntington Club. So this sentence in here speaks to that need to really kind of make those connections north and south as well as to its immediately surrounding land units. We've also done some additional language, included some additional language in highlight regarding the interparcel walkway to land unit I, since I know it's been a specific topic of conversation. So the new language reads that interparcel walkways, plural, to land unit I should provide accessible direct connections to the metro entrances, and in the southern portion to the central plaza to promote active mobility, health, and well-being within this area. And then it recognizes that due to the grade change in the southern portion, that walkway should have accessible landings that should be incorporated at frequent intervals along the trail to provide opportunities for respite and recreation for all ages and abilities. And then this is language that we've added here regarding that specific improvement, the southern walkway. The interparcel walkway in the southern portion should be designed and routed to lessen, shouldn't be to be lessened, to lessen disturbance to the natural area, and the location and feasibility, including in interim and final conditions, should be determined at the time of rezoning. So the first part of that is noting that this is an area that is an existing conservation easement. There are trees in this area, and that when this improvement is routed, that should be taken into account so that you minimize and lessen the disturbance to the natural environment within that area. And then it also notes that this improvement, given that there's a lot of factors at play regarding that particular connection. One is that you have an interim condition between when the southern portion of the WMATA site might potentially redevelop and when the Huntington Club side, which it intends to connect to, are on different timeframes. And so you might have a period of time that's what we refer to as the interim condition when you'd be tying into existing grade, and then a final condition when you'd be tying into proposed grade on the Huntington Club side. So those different timelines would need to be reconciled and could only be really reconciled once the zoning case has been submitted. What we advocate for this, we've strong from the staff standpoint, we strongly believe that it's important that it ties the whole thing together. But we do recognize that we haven't engineered this improvement, and we don't have a real sense of cost yet. And so we have included language that says that it would need to the feasibility of this improvement would also need to be identified at the time of rezoning. So those are the changes that we've made to that section. We again, from the staff standpoint, we support that southern phase walkway. And then as an alternative, since we've heard from the task force that there may be an alternative that should be considered for that section in particular, this alternative language right here that's in a box only notes that you would have an interparcel walkway in the northern portion. And so that actually reflects the adopted comprehensive plan map which shows, I'll show you the improvements in just one second. This parcel, this interparcel connection, which is in the plan today. So the box text would just recommend this, which was an improvement that was actually proffered for the Huntington Club Phase 3 redevelopment, but would not include mention of this. And so if the task force were to support the second kind of boxed alternative, it would be to not include this connection. So I know that was the specific topic of discussion for both the task force as well as for WMATA. So I will open it up to those that want to speak to this particular section. Jason? Jason, I think you might still have your hand up from a previous comment, but if you'd like to speak, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay. Mark.
Yeah. Graham, I appreciate it. Thanks for explaining all that. I guess when we look at this, can we go back to the to that aerial, or I guess the one that shows kind of the possible access points?
Is this the one, Mark?
That'll work. I mean, when you look and you say, we want to provide interparcel access. Well, we've got ability to, and I'm kind of tilting on the side, but at the northernmost side, you have interparcel access right along Huntington. You have interparcel access right where the Kiss and Ride lot connects in with where it almost basically touches the part of the Huntington Club access point. Going further to the extreme south, you'll have interparcel access along North Kings Highway. You'll have an opportunity for interparcel access on the other side of that little pocket park, by the S3 building. And that's 4 points of interparcel access right there. Putting interparcel access through the most topographically difficult portion of the property. That's also where the tall trees are. That's only going to serve a portion of the property that lives right at that part of Huntington Club, and which will provide. I think it's going to involve a lot of tree loss. I think it's going to involve, you think about the old thing with bridges freeze before the ground. That entire thing is going to be elevated, or most of it elevated. We're talking about these various landing things. From a weather standpoint, from a maintenance standpoint, from a safety standpoint, from a security standpoint, however well intended it is, it's really not feasible, nor do I really think it's necessary. And I think you've got 4 really good points of access there. And, if the goal is to provide opportunities for vistas and looking into the trees and stuff like that, we'll have that right along the top of where the upper part of the bus terminal area is. You'll have that at patio area right by next to S3. You'll have that down that linear path that we have going down Huntington Club. But this goes literally through the most difficult portion of the property. And I don't know that it really serves much. And it has tremendously adverse impact, and it's costly, unsafe, and for all the reasons I said. That's why we think, we would just propose going forward with the language F and language B. Thank you.
Mary, go ahead. Mary, are you there? We can't hear you.
Yeah, I like the connection, the proposal we had on the field trip, which was not the connection to Huntington Club, but a north-south connection that would kind of run down some driveways and across the top of the middle parking lot and have an elevator at some point. I mean, it really did seem feasible to do kind of a overground connection, overbuilding connection without displacing a lot of trees or anything, or just over things that were there already. And I like the idea of connecting the 2 parts, the north and the south. And if we can do it in an easy way, I think that's great. I don't speak for or against the walkway that Mark was talking about, but I think there should be a connection, and it might be better to do a simpler one on the other side.
Thank you. And Mary, we have some additional language about the north-south connection that we can describe down here, just in a section. So don't lose that thought.
Sure.
This is one of I guess 3 potential solutions is tying in the future phase 3 condition for Huntington Club as a part of a north-south, but don't lose that train of thought, because we'll get to the other options that we discussed, at the site visit in this section down here. Lynn, go ahead.
Well, I'm delighted to be able to support both Mark and Mary on the subject, and you've heard me say this many times about north and south, so I'll say that for the later section. But I just can't see why we're building this sort of winding path to go back and forth that really doesn't go anywhere. I mean, anybody in their right mind that wants to get to the Huntington Club is going to either walk down the sidewalk at North Kings Highway, or they're going to go down into wherever it is in the up and down side and go across on the connection of the Huntington Club to the metro. So frankly, it baffles me why the county is so hung up on this, because I don't see that it's going to be very useful. I don't think it's going to be used. And it'll be downright dangerous in the wintertime when it gets icy.
Okay. Anyone else here? Would anyone else like to chime in? I know there's been a particular topic of conversation. Okay. So, I mean, from a staff standpoint, we recognize that this is a challenge. We recognize that it's a severe grade. One of the things that we also recognize is that this is one improvement among many, where there's a lot of kind of unknowns. There's some uncertainty regarding kind of the landing point, for example, what it would look like in terms of interim phase versus final phase. And so we have included language about the feasibility and making sure that we have an assessment of the feasibility for that, should it proceed at the time of zoning. So I know I don't want to reiterate things that we've or rehash kind of the things that we've discussed in the past, but from our standpoint, we see it as a vital connection, as a potential option for being able to bring these 2 significant TOD sites together. There might be a better orientation than just the one that was conceptually shown that has the switchbacks across it. Perhaps one that's integrated with the S3 block, for example, that could be tied in with other types of circulation elements like elevators or escalators, that sort of thing. So we haven't designed it yet, and I would just recognize that it's one among many potential ways of getting both an east-west as well as a north-south connection. Mary, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll flag this one as a vote. As a vote item. So when we're going through the list, we can be sure to vote on that in particular. Okay. The last paragraph in this multimodal section relates to those other options for north-south connections. And so one of the things that when we went out and did the site visit that became abundantly clear was that there could be other opportunities in addition to going through Metro, as well as that interparcel connection to try to tie these north and south portions together. And so we've added additional language. I think previously we'd had language about a circulator system to tie the north and south together. And we've broadened kind of that range of options that should be considered at the time of zoning to include other innovative transportation elements. So some of those include repurposing garage parking areas for walkways. When we're on the middle garage, that was one thing that became very clear, was that might be a potential way of having a relatively easy connection from the north to the south and vice versa. Once it's tied in with future improvements on the north side, for example. And it would also need to include other elements, so vertical circulation elements such as vertical elevators, incline elevators or funiculars, and or escalators. And then we also have language regarding bus and other types of circulation systems, circulator systems should be explored to provide an accessible public connection between the northern and southern portions of the TSA and the site in both interim and final conditions. So that was important because, as y'all know, the north and the south are not timed to go at the same time, given that the transit infrastructure that would come down and would need to be either replaced or reconsidered occur on different timeframes. And so there very well likely will be a need for an interim connection to go north to south, as well as kind of a final condition to reflect what ultimately gets built in the north precinct, for example. So we thought that was important to have language regarding a north-south connection for both stages. And then once again, we haven't identified the exact type of transportation elements that would be the best and kind of the most feasible. So we have language in here that the feasibility of the elements should be identified at the time of the rezoning. Any questions on this text?
Yeah, I'd just like to make sure it says that whatever we do is ADA accessible or universal design or whatever term means it really will be. I don't know if all abilities carries that kind of weight.
So one addition, Mary, we have language here, provide an accessible. We could say provide an accessible public connection for all.
I mean, there's certain slope angles, and there's certain things that are very specific that make it ADA compliant. So it just should specify that, I think, so that it really is accessible.
So so the language that I've typed in here, would this be kind of getting at that? So provide an accessible public connection for all abilities between
I don't know. Check with your disabilities guys and ADA compliance guys, if that's the same as saying ADA compliant.
I think we would be comfortable with this and knowing that this would tell us what we need to know, which is that it would be something that would be consistent with ADA compliance. And we do have language earlier that says all ages and abilities in an earlier section, so we could include that too. Remember. Catherine.
When you speak about, what does it say, repurposing garage parking areas for walkways and vertical circulation and whatnot, does that include, I mean, they're inside of what was a garage. You're making it more pleasant. Is that what I hear you saying? So can you add anything in there that speaks to making it an inviting area? Because garages in general are nasty and they're just concrete. Because repurposing areas for a walkway could just say, I stripe the thing, as opposed to really enhancing it with, I'm not sure what.
Yeah, Catherine, we were having great visions on the top of the garage, the middle garage, which has a great view and a nice flip breeze, by the way, but it seemed like a nice place for a walkway. Might have to put a little cover on it, but there were no cars up there, and it could be repurposed into a walkway section, and it could be made quite pleasant, I think, with plants and plantings.
Right, that's up on the top. You have to get to the top first. And I guess what I'm reflecting on is it's been 100 years since I've been in Mexico, but a lot of the underground metro areas, they found catacombs and things that they exposed with glass walls. Now, we don't have that, but it'd be nice to have these attractive as opposed to just paint a walkway that somebody uses to get through an existing garage. So whatever language you can come up with would be really nice.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe we need to put in there well lit. So just so.
How's this? Just trying to take notes kind of contemporaneously. So this would say such as repurposing garage parking areas for walkways, including enhancements.
Yeah, that works.
Maybe it's fine the way it was. Enhancements to provide a pleasant, inviting, and well-lit pedestrian experience.
Yeah, because if you go over to Wheelie Avenue and you walk that stretch from one side of the 66 to the other, it's delightful.
Mhm.
They have shops, they have all kinds of stuff there.
Yeah, to finish my thought, I don't know where everything went. I completely disappeared. Just so that, I feel less of a need to carry my stun gun with me. So, because it's pretty funky in the garages at night, I will tell you that. You think I'm joking? I am not joking. I've got something like a 30,000 volt stun gun that I carry.
All remember to walk in front of Ellen.
Yes, exactly. Well, I don't know. I can get you from the back then.
May I
Walk
make a
quickly.
comment, Graham?
Better hustle.
Go ahead, Lynn.
Graham, may I make a comment on it?
Yes.
Let me just say once again, I think we're making a huge mistake here. If this is supposed to be a first-class, serious-looking place that's going to attract people from around, we need to do something other than let them walk across the damn garage. There's a perfectly good 60-foot or so strip of nice light green that goes down the east side of the station that you could have very nice escalators or vernacular with it or whatever. You could have coffee shop. You could have cross things. I just, I'm so frustrated that we've given all this attention to this curly little path with switchbacks, but we haven't put any real thought into something that increases the place, makes it look nicer, makes it really look first class. You got to be careful that you don't have something like I sent Tim through a couple of nights ago that you look like it's gonna fall in on you and it's gonna collapse. I mean, that's what garages are. They're not nice places. There's some place to park a car and get out of. But can't we have somebody at least try to design a good-looking enclosed escalator thing that would let the north and south enjoy being part of the same thing? I just don't understand why this is so foreign and we spend all our time on a switchback path. Last comment I'll make on this subject. You guys have heard too much from me.
Well, Lynn, I appreciate that. We have heard the comment, and I want to make sure that it's clear. One of the things that we've included in here is this discussion about vertical circulation elements, because we agree, having a north-south connection is important. The exact nature of how that improvement would take place would need to be something, as we've heard from WMATA, it needs to be something that either they, from a maintenance standpoint, can pay for as a maintenance item, or if it's something that's kind of different from what they currently have, then it's a different type of funding discussion. And so what we've included here is ideas and kind of things that would need to be explored once we have an actual development program. And so those include some of the things that I think you've described. If we need to talk about them in greater detail, we certainly can. But one of the things that we've included has been that reference to incline elevators, vertical elevators, and/or escalators. And so I want to make we've heard the comment for sure. We did spend a lot of time talking about the S3 block, the interparcel connection for sure. But I want to make sure that it's clear that we have included the comment, something that could be explored and should be explored. We would just need to ensure that it's something that could be done, and when there's alternatives that they're looked at when the zoning comes in.
I know, and thank you. I appreciate it.
Tim?
Just a comment. I think this kind of gets back to my earlier issue of just language placement. You have a few sentences down, the language you're looking for: public connection for all ages, abilities between the northern and southern portions of the site and the broader TSA. Perhaps once again, if that is a theme, if that is a plan, if that is a goal and a vision, which I think is a potentially good one, maybe it needs to be highlighted farther up in your paragraph or else in your overall building vision. That's a challenge, because this is such a complex project in so many ways, and we talked about that on the site visit of phasing, because you're going to have different development phases, different times, and maybe as that theme, so it's overarching and guiding to Lynn's point. You can make the language you have already have more significance.
If I could suggest something along those lines, we actually have a place in the urban design framework, which is further up in the document, that speaks kind of where a logical insertion would be, which is right here. In both the northern and southern portions, grid of streets should establish logical and walkable block pattern, recognizing that topography limits north-south connectivity. I'll just show this to the task force. Given this, we would potentially change it to this as opposed to the. This severe grade change across the site, innovative transportation elements, such as repurposing garages, etc., should be explored to provide accessible public connection. Noting that this is, something that's of importance to the overall urban design framework for the site. I think that's is that kind of what you're getting at, Tim? Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if maybe, and appreciate some input on this too. Mark, maybe you have some thoughts on this. Could this be within that framework? Could this be another paragraph that kind of highlights the north-south connection?
I think it could be. Yeah.
I mean, it's part of your vision.
Breaks it up a little more logically.
Yeah. I'm just thinking that might help, and it gets to what Lynn's been trying to emphasize. With good meaning all the time, and it highlights this is a challenging project regardless, because it's going to happen in phases and different parts, and you have different elements. But if you have overarching themes and goals and visions in mind, perhaps that guides it as it goes forward and keeps it connected. Lynn, does that help, you think?
Yeah, I think it does help. I agree. We need to get up there up front that we've got lots of problems with this site that's going to take some real effort. But I appreciate it. I'm fine with either one.
Okay.
I like the idea of it up front. Yeah. But
you guys have found the language, all of you, and the themes and the goals and the vision. It's just, I think, where you put it and how you emphasize it to keep that vision going for the future.
All right. Any objections to that move? So it takes that section from the multimodal circulation section, puts it up as its own paragraph in the urban design framework section, kind of following the language about topography. So it's
it's good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I will delete it from this section down here, just so that we follow along. Okay, so that was it from a multimodal circulation standpoint. I think we only have really just two more sections to deal with, and we can go to the votes. Parking. So this is cleanup, but we do have a section regarding parking. Again, largely an editorial change, but it just notes that kiss and ride facilities and on-street parking should be provided and managed to support the different uses on the site, including Metro's needs, so kiss and ride, for example, as well as those of the commercial uses. So that we had that in two different sections previously. I've condensed it down into one. Any questions on that? Okay. And then the rest of it is stuff that has not changed since last time, is language regarding lead silver and stormwater. but it hasn't changed. Again, we didn't have any comments on it last time that it changed. So, okay, so that's it. Mary, you had a
Yeah, I had a question on the affordable housing section.
yes.
Comment rather. Yeah, I was thinking it just seems very stark right in there, and I thought we should connect that with a vision and policies of the county as to, why this exists. And I put some language in my thing, but it would be, you could write whatever language, but it would be because it's a priority of the Board of Supervisors. They have set a goal of 10,000 units by 2035, I think. And because of the One Fairfax policy, we want apartments to be available at a variety of income levels. And then that would be one point, just to start it with a first sentence that kind of gives it a framework as to why this is important to do. And the second one would be to just make sure that the workforce dwelling unit plan is the one that's in effect, the new one that's adopted, that's in effect now in 2022, not the old one. And then I'm not sure if in the WDU plan, the sizes of units are designated, but I would hope not the size of the rooms, but the number of bedrooms would be proportional to the whole development, so that you'd have not just one bedroom places that were affordable or workforce development, but you'd have, the same range of bedrooms as you do in the whole development.
So I can answer that question regarding the county policy for that specific question.
Mm-hmm.
You have two standards. One is in Tyson's, where we have a proportional bedroom standard. And so that says that, if you're providing X number of units as market rate units that are 2-bedroom, you should have the same or a better proportion of committed affordable units with the same bedroom count.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it is in Tyson's. In the rest of the county, areas that are not Tyson's, this is a recent just update to the WDU policy, noted that instead of having a bedroom count, what we have is a square footage count. And so it says that you had to have for each market unit and each WDU, every market rate unit and every WDU need to be within 10% of the same square footage. So it's not exactly the same thing, but it's similar because it says they need to be roughly the same thing in terms of the total kind of quality of development, the size, specifically the size of the development of those units. That's countywide policy, is to kind of do that, so you have that proportionality that's addressed through the square footage.
Okay, I guess either one of those would work, because I've read in literature and seen on Zooms that a lot of times developers will make only like 1-bedroom units, and it won't accommodate the families that need apartments in that area. That just accommodates single people or couples, and a lot of the people in the income levels are family people, and it's kind of another way of not providing for people who already live here who'd like to live in the metro area. So, okay.
Okay, so
And then say the WDU in 2022 or I think it was passed in 2021, the new policy.
So there's I hear what you're saying, Mary, but because there's no grandfathering for policy. Once the policy's in, the policy's in. There had been a discussion about, what do you do with projects that are kind of in the development pipeline in terms of proffering to the new versus proffering to the old policy. At this point, it's been the policy of the county for 1.5 years. So the expectation would be for, from a policy standpoint, is to the existing WDU policy. It wouldn't be to the old one any longer. that we don't see that as a problem. We don't typically include the date. If there's a if that is a concern, my recommendation would actually be to include the AMIs, but it's not needed because we have that reference back to the WD policy, which is the only one that we are using any longer, which is the one with 80%.
I just have been seeing developments go to the planning commission that were still under the old rules. And I don't know what is the trigger that puts them under the old or the new. They say they started under the old. I don't know when this started. Maybe it just started with us, but it still started before the before the plans changed. There was still the application to the SSPA before the new WDU is put into effect.
Typically, it's been those that, and I'll let Mark. Mark's had experience with this, but typically what it is that the zoning application was in and had been in discussion prior to the new WDU policy being adopted by the board. So I don't think we're dealing with that situation for any new zoning applications any longer. Mark, let me know.
I can't conceive of a circumstance by which, someone could argue credibly with a straight face and prevail that they would be grandfathered in the old WDU policy. The new policy's been in place for a year and a half or so. We're going through this. If I filed a rezoning plan tomorrow, you're subject to the new policy. I would not put a date to that policy because that, say the 2021 policy, say they update it in 2025 or something like that.
Yeah.
And if you don't have it tracked, then frankly there may be a more skillful version of me that might come in and say, well, you know what, the thing says the 2021 policy, therefore I'm grandfathered under that. You don't get the benefit of that because other you have to make the corresponding edits of the conference in the comp plan. I would just keep it the way you have it there, and that way it floats with updates. It's unlikely the policy is going to get any less.
I would agree with Mark. We're actually likely to amend the policy for the preservation appendix either later on this year or in early 2023. I'm not sure of the exact date. So I hear your comment, Mary. I don't think that it's an issue since it's been in process it's been the policy of the county for a year and a half at this point, and we don't have a zoning case in for this application.
So the time it goes to a zoning case is when it goes for rezoning.
That's the way we had dealt with those that were kind of in the interim. Was just was it in, and if not, we don't have a zoning in for this project. So suffice it to say, it would go in under the new policy.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see, Mary, you had one question about the transportation section, and this is the TDA and the Huntington Community Planning sector-wide transportation section. We had moved some text from the land use section of the sector plan to the transportation section. That was an editorial change. But you had a question about Telegraph Road and the language down here.
Yeah, what does that mean? How can you discourage the traffic on Telegraph Road trying to get on I-95 at rush hour?
Sure. Let's see if I can pull up one of our friends at SCDOT. Bob, are you?
I mean, that's one of the most congested places in the Mount Vernon district or Lee district too.
Right. Yeah, Bob Pecora from FCDOT. Thanks for the question, Mary. So Telegraph Road is a public road, so it is still, we have this language that will to discourage the traffic from using Telegraph Road as an ulterior or alternate road parallel to Richmond Highway, parallel to I-95 to discourage cut-through traffic or when I-95 is backed up. We just have discouraged language that we would do that. But since it is a public road, and it still carries traffic. It's a minor arterial street, so it's designed to carry traffic on it, and it does connect up with at the northern end with I-495 at the Beltway, and then it goes all the way down to Richmond Highway down by Pohick Road. So I I think one way to discourage it is how we've structured the road, is that it is basically, it's a 3-lane road south of Franconia Road, and south of Franconia all the way down. Well, it's 3 lanes and 2 lanes actually. If it's a 3-lane, it's I'm adding a turn lane in there, but basically it's a 2-lane road. So that's one way to discourage the amount of traffic that goes through it. As you get closer to the Beltway, it goes up north of Franconia Road. It's a 4-lane road section. North of just around North Kings Highway, it turns into a 6-lane road because that's where all the traffic is. So the further south you go down on Telegraph Road, the narrower the road gets. So it's discouraged that way. So, and our comp plan calls out that it's to remain a 3-lane roadway from Franconia down to South Kings intersection. So that's the only way we can discourage it at the moment. So there's nothing we can do to prevent vehicles from traveling on it because it is a public road.
I have to kind of agree with Mary. Yeah, I mean, it's set so that you can come off of North Kings Highway and go to the Beltway, and that's going to go up enormously with the changes in Huntington Club and the Momata land. So, you know, frankly, it seems like sort of a useless throwaway sentence. I raised an eyebrow when I read it too.
Well, when we did the traffic analysis and we presented it at the May meeting, we looked at, there's 2 intersections on Telegraph Road at Huntington Avenue at North Kings Highway. So the mitigations for those are to modify the signal timing that allows more green time for through movements on Telegraph Road. So it's, if there's congestion there, it's allowing for as much through movement for vehicle traffic during the peak hours. But it also does not preclude that, hey, we need some green time for pedestrians crossing those intersections. So the TIA analysis did look at that, and that's the mitigations that we are that the consultants are proposing, but they're a traffic analysis. So we're understanding that, yes, there is going to be traffic impacts because of this is just the Wilmata site, but they included the Huntington Club analysis in it. So it's one of the key takeaways that we have from the traffic analysis is that the comp plan land uses, it does have a traffic impact, but it's not a significant additional amount of delays at study intersections at like the 24 intersections that we studied. So, and
okay, this late at night, I'm not gonna argue it.
Yeah, okay, no, that's all right. I've been waiting since 6:30 to say this, so it's just like that's fine. So
thanks to it's useful.
You know, I know transportation is important, and I'm glad we got this in. But yeah, Mary, thank you for the comment. And so this is language that we are not proposing to change here because it's still good language to have in the comp plan. So that's all I have for right now. So I'll be on till 10 o'clock if you guys need me. So I'm kidding about the 10. I'm kidding about the 10 o'clock. So.
Yeah, but we won't be.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I've also made a couple of additional, and these are completely editorial. There are changes to verbally describe the maps that we've made. And so this is only to reflect the changes. There's nothing of material substance that we haven't discussed previously. So that's regarding the land use map, the pedestrian circulation map, the height map, which we would update if needed following the discussion, and then the plazas and public open space map. Okay. Mary, your hand's up. Did you have a question?
Did I put it up? I meant to put it down. There you go.
Okay. And Lynn, go ahead.
I sure don't have anything. Sorry, I didn't take mine down either.
Can't lower your hand.
It's all good.
It won't let me lower it.
Okay. All right. So that's the document in a nutshell. So the next thing that we would want to do is let's go through the specific things where we had either some changes that took place compared to when the document came in, or were there some specific things that we wanted to vote on? This can be by affirmation unless there's a difference of opinion on the task force. So we need not do a roll call for each one. At this point, I do want to just make sure that we do have a quorum present before we kind of get into the voting. So I see, let's see, we got Mary, Catherine, Ellen, Lynn, Evan, Walter, and Tim. That makes 7. And Queenie, excuse me, I see Queenie down there. So that's 8. So we're good to go there. Are all of y'all able to?
And Graham, in keeping with the process, Tim and I are not voting. We'll have our set public hearing.
Okay. Good to know. All right. And so what I'll do is I'll just register as abstentions for each vote.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll start at the top and just kind of work our way down. And if there are other things that you want to bring up to vote on in particular, let me know. So going through the maps. And what we'll do with the maps, unless you want to see something specifically taken off of the maps that isn't reflected in the text, is we can make editorial changes to the maps that reflect the text edits, because the text edits are supposed to feed into the map and vice versa, unless there's something specific that you want to see taken off of these maps in particular. So we'll start with this one. I recognize that the interparcel connection over here is something that's in the text that we have a specific discussion item on. Is there anything else about the pedestrian circulation map that the task force would like to see changed?
Might help to add a note somewhere that tells that the straight lines aren't really straight for the walkways, that's just where it would connect, but not the indication of the path, because I think we all interpreted that as saying, oh my God, he's going to shoot us straight down the hill.
Okay. Okay. Any other, is there support for that edit? Okay.
Fine.
All right, so we'll note that in a box here, and just say that that's the case for the straight lines in particular. All right, any other edits? Height map.
We need a vote on that because we're all in disagreement on it.
I'll bring it to the language that we have for building heights first, and then we can make the update to the map. So building heights is described here, and unless there's specific geographies that you wanted moved in and out, that's not described here. But that one question in particular was regarding the 55 along the eastern edge, and so I think that we have a specific comment there. But does the task force have a specific thing that they would like to include?
I'd just like to take out that last sentence.
Right. If we're not going to build there, then take it out.
Are you making a motion? Or do we happen to do these in motions, Graham?
I think what we can do with this is through, well, I guess we probably should do it through a motion. So yes, I would think so. I think given the importance of these changes, I think we could do it as a motion through acclamation. So hear all the ayes. If there's nays, then we'll want to make sure that we have a recorded tally.
Then make the motion, I'll second it.
Okay. Does the maker of the motion want to proceed?
Yeah, let's go. Let's go.
Graham, do you want to do that or you want us to do that? Walter?
For the votes, I'd actually prefer it if it were the chairs. So,
Okay. Walter, you want to do it?
Walter, we can't hear you.
Sorry, guys. So which motion are we doing first?
We'll do the building height section. So I think there's a motion on the floor to remove this last sentence from the building heights map, or from the building heights section, and then to have the change be reflected on the map.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor to remove the last sentence in the building heights motion. All in favor of the removal of this last sentence, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? Ayes have it. All right, so that last sentence will be removed.
And the map needs to reflect no height.
And then, okay, and the map to reflect the height accordingly.
Okay, so that's building heights. Any other comments on building heights? And we will make one, let's put this out there
Graham,
between
the
now
only
and the.
thing I would like, I'm sorry, the only thing I would like to make a statement about there is the comprehensive plan as it currently has, and I don't want this to become a problem here, so we got to know it's the right language. For there's no FARs or anything like that for Beacon Mall, so they can do anything they want there. So how do we ensure when you take that out of there that this thing stays a green buffer? So whatever language needs to be put in there has got to be there.
Sure. So that's reflected in that other edit that was suggested that we can, that could be voted on as well. So there's this additional sentence. We're now on page 22. Yep. So this is the section related to green buffer or green building environment and landscape buffer, the last paragraph regarding vegetated landscape buffer. And then the edit that was suggested when we're going through it is that section say should be the landscape buffer area on the eastern boundary should be maintained and enhanced. And so I would think that the buffer area is the thing that's indicated now that should remain undeveloped. So that's what that sentence reads currently. It might need to say something. If the intent is to have that whole area be undeveloped, I think you might need an additional word in there that says, and that area to the east of Metro Garage Access Drive should remain undeveloped.
Yes, agreed.
So we are removing the section that says exclusive of metro operations.
Right.
Okay. Well, no, it doesn't. It says unless otherwise needed for metro operations. Then it should say, and I make a motion to go along with Ellen's, should not exceed 20 feet in height.
Why do we even need that if we're going to make it undeveloped? If it's going to remain undeveloped, we don't need anything.
But what it says, Ellen, and should remain undeveloped unless.
Well, we don't need the unless. Why would we need the unless?
So you remove height as long. I can't see it. It was too small. So you remove. Okay, good. Thank you.
There's a strike through. Yeah.
Right. Good. Thank you very much for enhancing of us blind.
I think it looks fine to me.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor that has been made by Ellen. And for this last paragraph regarding the green buffer, and that this area remains undeveloped. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been second, and all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? Ayes have it. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Walter and Graham, you should probably note that I abstained.
Yeah, noted that. Yeah, the Tim
Yeah.
and Walter abstain. Yeah, I have that.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So the next map was the landscape buffer. Let me just double check there wasn't anything else about this. So we had the building heights map. Unless there's no other comments on the building heights map, I think we had addressed the comments from the task force previously in the section.
Yeah, thanks for getting rid of that line. Good.
So the next is the landscape buffer and open space map. And so we had two comments in here. One was to move the Parker. That's an editorial cleanup item that we should have addressed earlier. So that's not a problem. I assume that there's no issues there, just to make sure that it's reflective of where the task force had previously wanted it to be located. And then the second one is to modify that landscape buffer area along the eastern edge to show kind of the approximate location of the existing conditions of that landscape area, as opposed to just kind of this more general line of the same width, for example, as what you see elsewhere throughout the TDA.
I don't want to prolong this at all, but I am curious why you didn't put the green on the other side of the metro station too, where you have where you're not planning to build.
There's a couple of reasons. One is that part of this area is intended for development, the S3 block, for example. The other is that the point of the landscape buffer is to provide a buffer between lower density and lower intensity uses and higher intensity and higher density.
Fine,
uses.
Graham. I don't need more explanation. Great, thanks.
Okay.
All right, we're ready for this motion. So we have a motion to modify the landscape buffer area along the eastern edge to show the existing conditions. So do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we have 2 abstentions. Thank you.
Okay. Did anyone have any questions regarding the TOD options? I think we had an edit here to bring a cross-reference to the active frontages section. So I could type that out really quickly. Building forms and activating street frontages. So that was the next one, to make that edit.
I'll say below so people know where to find it.
Okay. All right. Does anyone want to make a motion on that one?
I move we accept the change just typed in by Graham.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? We got 2 extensions, same extensions, and motion carries. Thank you.
Okay. The next was regarding, Mary, did we have alternative language, or did you have alternative language that you wanted to include regarding senior center and community center uses? Because I think that was the comment that you included here.
Well, if that's, I mean, I would take out the part about multiple use space, but we didn't actually discuss that. If you're going to have senior center, if you're going to have community center, senior center, I would prefer it be a dedicated space. Not the room that gets rented once in a while.
Well, Mary, couldn't it be a community, and senior center space? Because, from time to time, the population can change.
No, that's not the issue, Ellen. I don't care, community senior, that's fine. What I'm talking about is that it can either be a community senior center or it can be someplace rented in a multiple use building where it's not always a community senior center.
So if we put in dedicated, would that work?
That works for me.
Okay, so what's the motion? We have a motion?
To change this point to a dedicated community and or senior uses. And I would take out the multiple use of space capable of serving, that whole sentence there, as an alternative. I would like to see a dedicated space somewhere. I mean, you can rent it from a building, but it should be in the same place all the time.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
So just make sure I
Move
capture.
second.
So I'm just make sure I'm capturing this properly. Is this, Mary? Is this what your intention is?
Yeah, keep crossing it out.
As an just throwing it out there as an alternative, if the idea is to have a preference for a dedicated facility, another way of showing that would be to state that, so you still have flexibility for both types. One as a dedicated standalone use, so to speak, and stating that as a priority as opposed to a multiple use space capable of serving those uses. Just another way of doing it. Kind of states the priority without completing the clause. So it's up to the task force.
All right. Is there, Mary, you have a friendly amendment to your motion? You want to restate your motion?
All right, we can say it's with a preference for the dedicated community and or senior uses with the possible alternative of using multiple use space.
Okay, and do we have a second?
Second.
Move to second. All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? And we have the same extensions.
Any other edits in this section regarding land use program? Okay. There's this. We had recommended language from Mark and from WMATA regarding the inclusion of language regarding public-private partnership entity in this section as an addition to be provided and maintained by the developer. So if I were to type it out, it would look like that. I don't want to rehash it. I'll just state that I think WMATA prefers this language. Staff supports the current language.
I move we accept the WMATA language.
Yep. I'll second.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Moved in second. Okay, thanks, Ellen. Moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Same two abstentions. Motion carries.
The next is to move this language from multimodal to urban design framework. This is related to the innovative transportation elements for bringing about that north to south connection. So includes the edits that we discussed regarding enhancements to the garage parking areas for walkways, discussion of all ages and abilities for the connection to take place.
I move we might accept the change.
Change has been accepted. Is there a second?
I'll second. Mary can second that one.
It's moved to second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same two abstentions. Motion carries.
We moved this, otherwise there were no edits. Moving the, I don't think we need to vote on that. That's the moving that section of building forms up slightly, given that it's enhanced priority over in the document. So helping that link a little bit better to the ground floor retail section that's above it in the review section.
I don't think there's an issue here. Do we have to vote on everything? We can just say it's
No.
okay.
No, I think it's fine. There's no
Just to move.
Yeah. Okay. The next one, same as before. Mark had suggested language.
Yeah.
The following
Good.
for urban parks.
Yes.
Okay, we've already accepted that language, so it's all right.
Yeah, motion to accept.
All right, so we don't need to vote on it. We just accept it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, and then there's one additional edit here to relate back. Oops. Just a simple reference back to the policy plan for the urban parks framework.
Again, no issue, really.
Okay, building heights, we've done that one. Multimodal section, multimodal circulation. I don't think that there were any edits here other than the interparcel connection. And so the question before the task force is this language preferred and are there any edits, or is this language preferred and are there any edits? So this alternative B language would be to replace the highlighted language if that's the preference of the task force.
I certainly support the alternative.
Well, the alternative says, facilitate the movement to.
I think so.
Can you make it a little bigger again, Graham? It's easier to read.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, the alternative language is much better. I agree. If Lynn made the motion, I'll second.
So we got a motion on the floor, it's been seconded. So all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Same two extensions, motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, we talked about the vegetated landscape buffer. That's a previous vote. We have Mary suggested inclusion of language regarding the Board of Supervisors' goal to make affordable housing a priority throughout the county and especially near transit.
And not an issue, just explanatory.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yep, move along.
Okay. Similar comment here, that the size of the committed units, so the workforce units, and to ensure that this is consistent with county policy, I'll make a clarification, workforce dwelling.
All good.
It's good stuff. Fine.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's it.
Great.
Woo.
All right, and so I think one more vote is needed, which is the vote on the task force's recommended plan text. So with those edits made, I think the next question would be, does the task force support this as their recommendation on the Huntington plan amendment?
I move that we support this in its entirety at this point with the changes made.
Second.
Move the second.
Well, I have a
Favor?
question. I have a question, guys.
Sorry, ready for the question?
Yeah, wait a sec. Graham, is this going to be the task force's recommendation and the staff's recommendation? Or are you guys going to go yours forward the way you wrote it before we just voted to change it?
I think the vast majority of it is stuff that we would support. I mean, I think the one thing in particular that I think where we do have a difference of opinion is on the interparcel connection, which is why we had put this language into a box. And so we'll take it back and review the whole thing with senior management. So I can't say with absolute certainty that the exact version that the task force has put forward is the one that staff would ultimately support. I could say that looking at the edits that have been made, I think the vast majority of them are things that we can support. But I think that we would still continue to advocate for the language we have in this highlighted section. But with that one caveat aside, I think we're in good shape. So, Catherine, you're muted.
So we still need somebody to agree to go forward on the 19th and argue our position on this, because it will be different from yours.
I would anticipate that. Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And that decision of who would represent the group doesn't have to be made tonight.
Yeah, let's vote on this thing.
All right, so there's a motion on the floor that was seconded. You ready for the vote?
Yes.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? The same two. Thank you very much.
And I think the motion should really be said, Walter. I don't want to go back on it, but it should be that we support this version of it. It should be quite clear. I think Catherine's point is a good one. Whose document is this?
Right, exactly.
All right.
And
Okay.
you're going to codify all of that and send a copy of it out to all of us so we know it's exactly what we agreed to tonight, please.
You bet. Absolutely. No, we'll clean it up, make it into something that doesn't have all the track changes and highlights all over it and everything like that. Yeah. Between the blue that we did today, the orange that we did in the past 2 weeks, the red we did 3 weeks ago. Yeah, okay. I think a clean version is necessary.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, is this the final of the SSPA from Mount Vernon County, Mount Vernon District?
Is this it, Graham?
Yeah.
We got,
I think I wanted to turn it over to Megan and to Aaron for kind of a discussion of the next steps with the task force. One thing I'll mention, first of all, congratulations on coming to a recommendation. We've been working on this for in earnest for a year at this point, with Huntington in particular, but even before that screening, it goes back a good long way. So thank you for all of your hard work on this, your volunteer hours and hours spent on this effort. So very much appreciated from staff. Thank you.
We appreciate you for handling this and moving the entire staff and Aaron and Megan, and we really appreciate you guys.
And thank you. And it's absolutely not just been me on the staff end. I've had a terrific team: Megan, Aaron, Joanne, Bob, Tim. Shout outs Elizabeth. shout outs all around for a great team that I've been able to work with.
Yeah.
On behalf of WMATA, I'd offer the same thing. Thanks to everybody, staff, commissioners, all the volunteers, all the community members. I mean, it's what makes this area of the county so great. You know, really appreciate it. And, with that, I'm going to shut up and let everybody go back to their lives. But appreciate all you guys have done.
Yeah, thank you,
What's-
Mark.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate you guys.
So what's the next step here, gang?
So next,
Graham said something about a bowling party.
Bowling. Exactly.
No? All right.
Ken, if you want to,
I really
you might have to
think
we would have to notice it as a public meeting, but
And I do think the entire team should come out to the public hearing physically.
We
in
will
this
if it's on
space.
Zoom.
Yep.
No, physically, not Zoom. Come out to the Taj Mahal.
the next. Yeah, so next steps is the public hearing, and so dates, we're looking for dates in October to bring this to the Planning Commission. The exact dates of the hearing have not been identified. We don't have the calendar yet to say exactly which date, but as soon as we have something scheduled with Jill, we'll let the task force know so that they can come out and so that somebody can be identified to kind of read into the minutes the task force recommendation and provide the perspective of the task force. So,
Question, Graham, do you think it will be early on in the agenda, or will we be there till 1 o'clock in the morning?
I hope not. I hope not on that case for everybody's sake. I'm not sure. It's too soon to tell.
Okay.
I can ask that we get bumped up in the agenda, given its importance and the idea that we would want to make sure that people can attend.
Let's send the youngest member who can.
Sorry?
Let's send the youngest member to that ordeal.
Yes.
There you go.
I don't know who that might be, Mary, but
It's not me and it's not Catherine. We already know that. So woo-hoo.
Must be Lynn.
It's not me.
It
Thank
might
you,
be
Walter.
you,
You're the
Quincy.
first person that's called me the youngest person.
No, it's not Queenie. I'm 70.
You are not.
Hey, we were all
So
young
it
at some
must be
point.
you, Ellen. It's you, Ellen.
No, I'm older than you are. Sorry.
Okay.
birthdays, and come on.
One more staff member that I neglected to give a shout out to was Tom. So I didn't see Tom's thing there, but Tom's been a big help on this as well. So just want to make sure I give him kudos because they are well deserved.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
We should all thank you, Walter, too, for not only Graham but and his staff, but you guys, for Walter and Tim for all their efforts. So thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Couldn't have done it without you guys. You were great as always.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a long haul. Thank you, guys,
Yep.
for all the organizing and.
So the next step is the October public hearing.
That's
And then
correct.
that's,
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah, the October public hearing, and then anticipating that if the Planning Commission, votes to make a recommendation, that hearing or shortly thereafter, we'd
Right.
be looking at a board hearing, most likely in November.
okay. Great.
One final thing, I'll just give a shout out to Mark, Neil, the WMATA team, Roz, Stephen, Carter, Miguel, Matthew. There's a big team that's been kind of a big part of this, and so they've been very collaborative. We've had a lot of discussion with them, and so I recognize that they've put a lot of effort into this as well, and I've really appreciated their collaboration on this. It's been very, very productive, highly cordial. I've always appreciated their insights and guidance on this. So I want to give them a shout out too.
Thanks.
Great job getting us through, Graham.
Yep.
You and Aaron and everybody else. It was great.
Yes. Yeah.
And fun.
Oh yeah, lots of fun.
Usually.
Productive.
Next time, we need more field trips.
You got it.
Excellent. Aaron, before
and Lynn got to bake us cookies.
Yeah, absolutely.
before we break, Aaron or Megan, do either of y'all want to kind of give it next steps? Because this was, this is the last SSPA item that the task force has been looking at, that's active. Do you have a kind of an update on the other two?
For the Mount Vernon Highway SNA amendment, so the supervisor has asked us to do further outreach with the property owners and also the wider community. So we envision that amendment is going to be handled like a board authorized amendment, so outside of the SSPA process, so the task force won't have to reconvene to vote on that. So, but we will be doing outreach, with the MVCCA and other residents around that area and the property owners and other groups. And Megan, I would envision that for the Ingleside trailer park amendment, it would be something similar, but.
And I would just note that it's still kind of too early to tell. I think some of the members of this group are on the manufactured housing task force as well, which is I think they've had their final meeting, but that group is developing recommended policy for the Board of Supervisors to consider, which was intended to be adopted prior to the review of the Ingleside amendment. So that one's kind of in a similar state where there's additional work that needs to take place before the review of that amendment carries on. So that's our understanding as well, is that would follow its own kind of outreach plan at this point.
All right. Is there anything else further for the good of the group?
Walter, it's been a pleasure, sir.
Thank you.
As always, Tim.
I moved that we adjourn.
Yes.
Is there a second?
Yeah. I'll second it. Thank you to everybody, the fellow task members, all the people who've helped, and staff, and Walter and Tim. It's been great.
Yeah, it's been awesome, guys. See you around the community.
Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.